Did something that seemed like garbage turn out to be your best investment? I bought a 2001 Subaru Forester with 250,000 miles for $2,000, and that little box of crap has yet to ever let me down for the past 2 years. I just drove it back and forth from LA to Phoenix with no problems other than a small oil leak. I do all of my own maintenance on it, and I plan on replacing its engine in the next couple of months, due to the fact that a new EJ251 isn't too much money. I bought a jailbroken Fire Stick last year for $100. 12 months later, I've cut out my DirecTV and I strictly just use the Fire Stick. That thing has saved me close to $1,000 so far. When I was about 10 years old, my parents and I were in our backyard clearing out a ton of scrubs that had gotten out of hand. I had trouble focusing because our next-door neighbor had this really adorable puppy, and all I wanted to do was play with him. We found out that they were actually going to take him to an animal shelter because their son was not taking care of him like he had promised. I decided to ask my parents if maybe we could get him instead. I was an only child and never really had anyone to play with unless a friend would come over, and the thought of having a puppy to play with whenever I wanted to was great. My parents agreed, and our neighbors offered to sell him to us for $20, which is really cheap for a dog when you think about it. I had that saved up and immediately agreed and promised I'd care for him and love him forever. So he became my puppy, my brother, and after a few days of debating, I named him Snoopy. Snoopy became my closest friend. He made me laugh, played with me, and would just hang out and watch TV with me. He was always there for me, especially through some tough times in my life where I was extremely self-destructive. He saved me from myself. He was there at my side through tough breakups where all I ever wanted to do was lay in bed. He was an amazing friend. He was there to see me graduate 8th grade, high school, and college. I hoped he'd be there on the day I got married and maybe around for some time when I had kids, but unfortunately, as much as we wish for things, sometimes they just don't happen. He died 4 years ago after being by my side for almost 17 years. That little ball of fur we bought for $20 made such a huge impact on my life, bringing me years of happiness, friendship, and love. Definitely the best cheap purchase I've ever made. Damn it, this was meant to be a thread of miraculous purchases, not something that makes YouTube narrators cry. I guess this one is both. Rest in peace, Snoopy, you wonderful pooch. A cat toy that is literally just a feather on the end of a stick. It was only $1, but my cat gets hours of entertainment from it. Went camping and forgot knives for food prep. Went to local grocery store and bought a package of 3 cheap, no-name, plastic-handle paring knives, different sizes. They were the best knives in the history of the planet. They're still my main knives years later. The best barbecue I've ever owned was a $20 Walmart grill that my dad bought for camping. Both him and I have searched for this particular type of barbecue since then, and we just can't find it. Must have been a limited run with poor sales. It was a charcoal grill, and the circular part that held the coals spun up and down along the central post. Most precise temperature control I've ever had while grilling. When my dad moved out following the divorce, he let me keep it. Then one of my college roommates threw it out because he didn't like it or something. Ugh. Okay, so keep in mind that cheap is a relative term. In the town where I live, there's a slightly sketchy area. It's not bad, but it's not nice either. There's a pub around the corner, and all the buildings are dirty. There are some council flats nearby. And then there's my flat. An elderly lady had lived in it before, and she had moved into a nursing home. The flat went up for sale. A few people came to the viewings, and of the people who did, nobody wanted to show it the TLC that it sorely needed. It was built in the 1970s and has been refurbished once in the early 90s. Done details are still original, like the fuse box, which sometimes has fireworks inside of it. The floors were covered with an awful carpet the color of a rotting peach. The windows were dirty and covered with greasy blinds. It was a piece of work. I got it for cheap, way below my budget, and I spent several weeks doing it up on evenings and weekends. I ripped down grimy old wallpaper and tore up the carpet. I painted the walls and got rid of the blinds. I contracted someone to do the bathroom and floors for me. Now it's a mid-century modern flat type with a touch of Scandinavian minimalism. It was a sketchy, kinda cheap buy, but definitely my best one to date. In short, TLC turns sketchy to great. December 2012. Being out of Chicago, I bought a concert ticket through Craigslist out of Los Angeles for a one-night jazz concert hosted by none other than Tenacious D. After I paid through PayPal, the guy says he'd contact the venue to confirm the transfer. I bought my plane ticket and hotel room on good faith that this would work. I fly down the night before, go to Sunset Boulevard and get my room. The day of, I wait from 12 p.m. to 4 outside the venue by myself. I see at some point people loading equipment into the venue. I walk in through the side door, sit down at a random table for a bit, and end up talking with the production manager for the duo for a bit. I was told by him that hanging out was okay, but I'd be kicked out at 6 before rehearsal. 6 p.m. rolls around and I exit to get back in line. At this point, I'm now at the back of a 20-person line. An old lady proceeds to walk up to wait in line behind me. She's definitely not the age demographic for a Tenacious D concert. She proceeded to talk with me. "What time does the venue open? I'm supposed to be inside already." I tell her 8 p.m. Being that we're at a jazz club, I think maybe she's here for the wrong show. I ask her who she's here to see tonight. She says, "My son and daughter are playing here tonight." I respond, "Well, who's your son and daughter?" "Oh, my daughter," I can't remember her name, "and my son Jack." "Oh, right, let's get you inside." She holds my shoulder with one hand, cane in the other, and I bring her to the front door and knock real hard. The bouncer opens the door and I say, "I'm here with Jack's mom and I need to get her inside." "All right, second booth on the right." We walk in, I get halfway to her assigned seat, and an older gentleman meets me halfway and takes her the rest of the way to her seat. He comes back, thanks me, and talks with me for another 20 minutes while rehearsal's going on. Turns out it's Jack Black's stepdad. Rehearsal wraps up and he asks me if I want to meet his stepson. Heck yeah, I do. To wrap up the story, I get to meet Jables, Rage Cage, Cones, the electric guitarist, Spike, the bass, Brooks, the drummer. They all sign my vinyl collection, including OG, POD, ROTF, Jazz, and the Brutal Legend vinyl sleeve, and I got my pictures with all of my heroes. I then stand up in front row to the greatest jazz concert ever, sitting next to Billy Zane, the evil bald guy from the Titanic movie. To be honest, I don't even know if my Craigslist ticket purchase was legit or real, but I still got to see the show, meet my heroes face to face, and have this epic story to tell. Sometimes just walking into a place like you belong there can just work. In this case, under the guise of Jack Black's mom's caretaker. Not sure what you paid for the ticket, but it sounds like it was 1,000,000 times more than worth it in any case. $5 for a pack of 2 pairs of earbuds from Amazon. They were the best I've ever used. One lasted me a whole school year, the others I gave to a friend. I bought plane tickets from Pittsburgh to Dublin, Ireland from a sketchy site. It involved 3 layovers and 2 airlines. The company had 1 to 2 star reviews on every website I went to, and I didn't find a single positive review, but I bought the ticket anyway. After 20 hours, 4 flights, and a really sketchy layover in Portugal, I'd flown across the Atlantic with no problem for $200. A picture frame I got from the dollar store. People keep telling me how fancy it looks. I got my wedding dress for $250 offline. It's quality and fits like a glove. I financed a $400 mattress from a furniture store and it wasn't very comfortable, plus serious buyer's remorse. I returned it 30 days for a full refund and decided to take a chance on a $400 mattress from Amazon. One of the best purchases I've ever made. Super comfortable and far cheaper than the equivalent store mattresses. $70 ring from JCPenney's. Wife for 22 years and counting. That's $3.18 per year. Really good investment. Of course, she throws it at me from time to time, but a $70 ring doesn't do too much damage. Plus, she throws like a girl, so there's that. $1,300 for a salvage title. I found a 22-year-old Honda motorcycle. Owned it for 10 years and all I ever had to do was tires, brakes, oil changes, and scheduled maintenance. Never had an issue with that wonderful bike. Netflix stock quite a while ago when mailing DVDs was their main business model. In 2006, I purchased a home that was never gutted after Hurricane Katrina. Had lots of water in it for way too long and about 2 feet of muck, but the house only cost me 16 grand. I put 50 grand in parts into it and did 90% of the work myself. After 12 months, I rented it for $1,800 a month. After a few years, I sold it for over $300,000. That was a lot of fun for 22-year-old me. A hamster. $30. I bought him on a whim when I was in a dark place and I fell in love instantly. It only took me a few hours and he was accepting food from my hand. By the third day, he sat on my hand for the first time. When I entered the room, he'd wake up, wobble out of his hut, and hop up and down on the terrarium's glass front until I interacted with him. He loved my cats as well. When they sat around or on top of his terrarium, he'd hop up and down and stand against the glass to check them out. Whenever I changed his environment, he ran around and checked out every nook. He really loved toilet paper rolls and the flower pot that I'd fill with a soft plant that he'd nibble on. My dwarf hamster, Carl the Great, lived for 2.5 years and spread love wherever he hopped and wobbled. Any harbor freight tool. If used properly, at minimum you get your money's worth. At best, your $20 torque wrench has earned you a few $1,000s worth of work and saved repair bills by doing your own work. Big Bear Claw Back Scratcher. I bought a $6,300 tiny house trailer from a MAGA guy out of state who said he'd take guns or cash and had a bunch of barking dogs. A little fixing up and it's been the home for a homeless transgender youth for 4 months now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Birth control pills from an online international pharmacy. I know that there are some people on the internet that will make blissfully unaware recommendations, but there are many, many women who do not have easy access in the US. When I lived in South Carolina, Planned Parenthood was a 2-hour drive and county health services meant a 3-month wait for an appointment. If you could wait 3 months, the day of your appointment you'd still wait hours to see the doctor. The doctor would perform a brutal and cold, stabby pap smear. This would then be followed by bullying. He would not prescribe birth control pills, but would try to coerce women into Depo-Provera or Norplant. I'm so happy that I took a chance on the $3 a month pills that Indian pharmacy sent me. They worked just fine for the 15 years I lacked access. A cheap bargain bin dollar store Johnny. It didn't work, but now I have the most beautiful 3-year-old daughter because my protection failed. I don't know if this counts, as the product was expensive, but hey-ho, it's an interesting story. Me and my friend were chilling in a mall when one of those beauty salesmen approached us. His salesmanship was so relentless that me and my friend both ended up buying the bare minimum each so he could leave us alone. He kept lowering the price and we both ended up spending 48 Great British pounds, which is a lot of money for a skincare product. We still chalk it up to us being on green herb and not firm enough with our answer. Anyway, a month goes by and I remember the mistake and decide to Google the product. Turns out a lot of old rich people really liked its apparent anti-aging properties and was listed on eBay for around double the price at its cheapest. I quickly list it at the going price and it's bought for a whopping £115, including the postage. Funnily enough, my friend had decided to open his bottle the second we got back from the mall to make the most of his purchase. He flipped when I told him the going price, and even more so when I sold mine. I bought $20 army cargo pants from the military surplus store. The pros? Same material and double need as Carhartts that were twice the cost. Super rugged and don't care about stains. They're my work pants, plus they're camo. They're roomy, comfortable, designed to fit you even if they're not exactly your size. There's more storage space than your mum's Kia. They're made in the US, not by oppressive labor overseas. Plus, they support a locally owned shop. And the cons? Well, my wife won't be seen in public with me wearing them. Melamine sponges from China. I hated having to buy a small pack of Mr. Clean magic erasers so often, so I tried to find them in bulk. I call them Mr. Wee's magic erasers because it came from a Mr. Wee. Pair of $11 ankle boots from Walmart. They actually fit, which is amazing in itself because I have freaky feet that don't fit most women's shoes. They're so comfy, they looked cute with any and all pants and lasted for several years. I still miss those damn boots years later. I bought a random guy a beer at a dive bar. 7 years later and we're married with a kid. Pretty solid investment. Counterfeit Dr. Dre Beats pills for $5 in Cambodia. 25 years ago, I bought this cool, long-sleeved, tie-dye t-shirt at the thrift store for 25 cents. I still have it and finally just downgraded it to an around-the-house shirt because of the holes around its collar. I was lured into a ghetto housing area by the prospect of a $40 Surface Pro 2017. People approached me with weapons and I was like, oh god, I'm going to die. Then a man walked in between them and said, "Are you the buyer?" I said yes and paid for the computer, and he said, "Sorry, they thought you were here to harm me." I left and now I'm here. To be fair, a lot of us would go into highly suspect locales to get a Surface Pro for that much. I'm about to buy a new one for my remote recording jobs, and the cost is making me very, very sad indeed. I honestly think I'd walk into an active war zone for a Surface Pro for $40. A body pillow. When I had major abdominal surgery, finding a sleeping position was hard. This really helped as it took the pressure off my front. Just a couple of weeks ago, I saw a flat-screen TV for $40 at a thrift shop. Or it might have been a computer monitor, I'm not sure. From corner to corner, it's about as long as my elbow to my fingertips. It had a PC input, all the video inputs, 2 HDMI inputs, some USB inputs, cable input, the whole works. So immediately I wasn't sure if it was too good to be true. It turned on and all of the buttons worked, but there was no remote. Also, I was told there were no returns, only exchanges. Well, I went ahead and bought it anyway, and it worked like a dream. I finally have something I can bring with me when I make my next move. I can change the volume and input with the side buttons, so that's basically all I need. One day I might get a universal remote so I can change the brightness, but I'm basically set. Probably about 15 years ago, I brought a Wichita State University t-shirt at a thrift store. No reason, no affiliation. Smash cut to now, I only ever wear a Wichita State t-shirt to bed. Never as an actual shirt, just to sleep in. 15 years and running. 75-cent rubber from the gas station. I bought a really cheap wallet phone case from Wish because I've had my wallet stolen twice. So I decided to fully embrace my grandmotherly qualities. I'm 21, and about 2 weeks into owning it, I noticed my phone in the actual case itself was starting to detach from the wallet part, and I was like, oh great, this is what I get for cheap. And it turns out it's meant to come apart. My phone case is a magnet. Now I just stick it to anything metal and take photos or watch TV. Sticking it to my washer to watch Netflix has been a game changer. I highly recommend getting a magnetic phone case. A tour guide approached us outside the Vatican offering the best discounted Vatican tours. This guy was the definition of sketchy. But we were like, oh, what the hell, when in Rome, pun intended. It was indeed a discounted tour and turned out to be a highlight of our trip to Rome. The tour guide was awesome and we skipped all of the lines to get right in. The substances from that festival I was at in 2015. 2 years ago, I bought a 1991 Ford F450 flatbed wrecker, commonly known as a rollback, for $4,000, from a group of crystal addicts in the deep south of Texas. The truck was easily worth $15,000. I was sincerely worried that on the way there I'd just end up getting mugged. Fortunately for me, everything turned up spades. There's no way in heck, as poor as I was back then, that I could ever hope to afford a new rollback wrecker. I now own a small auto transport business in Southern California, and I still drive that same old rollback wrecker to this day. I'm so glad that I gathered up my courage and did the deal because it truly catapulted my life into a new beginning. I was able to move out of my 30-foot travel trailer into a no bullcrap concrete foundation brick-and-mortar house. Thank you so much, little rollback, for being the most reliable and best money-making truck I've ever had. I spent $11 for a pair of 10-foot phone charger cords on Amazon. I figured as often as I had to replace them, $11 wasn't bad for two. 3 years later, and I'm still using the first one. My puppy. We bought him from some sketchy dude on the southwest side of San Antonio, and the little guy was in rough shape. But now he's almost 8 months old and a whopping 92 pounds of muscle and loose skin. The vet said we had a very nice horse. I searched around for a vasectomy reversal. Everything looked to be $15,000 to $20,000. Finally found a guy in Rhode Island for less than $3,000. This guy was alone in an office in a strip mall. He took cash only, which was very sketchy to me. I was afraid I'd come to in a bathtub full of ice. That didn't happen, but even after the procedure I was certain it didn't work and maybe the guy was a quack or a scam. This was over 3 years ago and my wife and I couldn't get pregnant for some reason. I figured I knew the reason. Well, I was wrong. Turns out it was her the whole time and my surgery worked perfectly. After a few visits to a fertility clinic, we're now 26 weeks pregnant, with a baby boy due in November. Definitely a sketchy cheap buy that ended up being one of my best purchases. My sister bought this sus eyelash curler kit. You put some chemicals on it like they do in the salons and it keeps your lashes curled for about 4 to 6 weeks. She got it for $10 on Amazon and the crap worked. If you go to a salon, they charge at least $50. Zenny is a glasses frame online shop and at first I was skeptical by how cheap it was, but my god are the frames durable. 100 out of 10 would recommend. I built my own mattress. I was online shopping and I stumbled upon several mattress-in-a-box companies such as Purple or Casper. I noticed that they constantly had diagrams on their websites that showcased the different layers of foam they use to construct their mattresses. I simply went to a foam wholesaler and in the dimensions of a queen mattress, I ordered different types of foam: standard, soft, memory, eggshell, in varying thicknesses. I stacked them all up on top of one another and I've slept like a baby for the last 2 years. It cost me $300 as opposed to a similar mattress from an online site that would have cost hundreds more. 15 years ago, I was getting deployed for the first time. I wanted a backpack as a carry-on, but it had to be solid black. Went to a few places and ended up at Dick's Sporting Goods. I found exactly one bag that was solid black and it was perfect, but it didn't have a tag. Went to the register and the guy spent 10 minutes with 2 managers trying to figure out which bag it was so they could ring it up. They finally asked me, "Well, how much is it worth to you?" I replied that I needed it to deploy in the morning, so I'd pay whatever they wanted, and they charged me $10. It's a Kryptonics backpack that's no longer made now. I've taken it on 4 deployments, 3 TDYs, all over the country, and it made it through my BS and MS degrees. I'm now using it to pursue my PhD, and it's a bit ragged, but I love this darn bag. I've got this Kiwi brand knife, made in Thailand of course, for like $6. It was over 10 years ago when I lived in Melbourne, and that baby can still be sharpened into a razor. It's the best frickin' knife ever. You could cut silk with this thing. It's hacked through PVC, dismantled so many chickens, turned onions into confetti on the reg, and it still slices a tomato like it's a goddamn katana. Truckers, what creepy things have happened to you while you were parking overnight somewhere? Pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No streetlights or anything, pitch black. No other trucks or cars at the stop. I turn off my lights. I switch the truck off, do the curtains, lock the truck from both sides, jump into bed, set my alarm, and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling over from side to side for around 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summertime temperatures, reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out the day ahead. Suddenly, the passenger side door opens up slightly. Cabin lights turn on. What the frick? Now, the truck is a fairly late model and in pristine condition, so there's no question about door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like an eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there with the solid rod in my hand we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all, just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B-double. After around 5 to 10 minutes of getting screwed around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up the next morning, yawned, fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and FML, there's a cemetery next to the stop where I parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization. Grabbed the keys, screw-putting my shoes on, screw-putting pants on, switched the truck on, and just got the flip out of there ASAP. I have an Aussie story for you. My friend's dad was a trucker out of Perth, and this is the only story I've heard that's really given me the creeps. So he's driving back to Perth in convoy with a mate of his, back to back, through the Nullarbor. If you know anything about Aboriginal legend, the Nullarbor is where the ancestors' spirits walk, and also prime Yowie country. They radio each other because they realize they need to rest up and decide to sleep through to dawn and make Perth in the morning. So they pull over in the middle of the vast nothingness, lock up, and hunker down for the night. At some point in the blackness, my friend's dad wakes up with this intense feeling of being not just watched, but stared down. He's not a superstitious guy either. He's a proper no-nonsense countryman. He says he just had this gut feeling that something was out there and wanted him gone. He says he scrambles up to the cab and checks his keys and turns his lights on. And at that exact second in the middle of the night, his mate does the same. Both trucks roar into life and they take off down the highway without a word spoken between them. Later, his mate says he felt the same predatory state and fear for his life so hard that he'd have just gone too. I don't know how true it is, but it's a good story and pretty creepy. I understand that in the past my faux Australian accent has led to some mixed reactions in my previous videos, which delights me. However, I really didn't think it could stand up to 2 longer stories from Australia in a row. I'll get you next time, Aussies. I used to haul saltwater off of well sites in Oklahoma on the night shift. I was standing at the rear of my trailer as I was loading out in BFE somewhere when I heard gravel crunching like someone was walking toward me. Got that feeling where you feel like you're being watched. Stepped around the trailer toward the sound and shined my flashlight at a cow licking the side of my trailer.
I am cow, and when it's late and all the men have parked their freight, and when I find a man who's stuck, I walk right up. I lick the truck.
Back when my dad was a truck driver, he stopped to sleep in a lot one night. The guy he leased his truck from happened to see him parked there, and in the morning when my dad went to the restroom, this guy used a spare key and hid in the sleeper. Once my dad was starting to leave, the guy reached out and grabbed him. My dad said he freaked out, so he just bailed out of the truck. It was moving around 5 miles per hour. My boyfriend is a truck driver who routinely does midnight runs. Oddly enough, I asked him this question myself a few days ago. He told me that one night he was getting ready to park in a lot next to a truck stop. He said it looked like there were no lights, no cars, no sign of anyone, but he said, screw it, he was tired. He woke up the next morning parked on the side of the road with 3 highway patrol vehicles behind him. He was about 15 miles away from the truck stop he had parked at. Thing is, he was sleeping in his camper the whole night. He has no idea how he got to the side of the road, and logic says someone tried stealing the truck and succeeded. And the police convinced him of this happening as they saw a man in a black jumpsuit running away from the truck into a nearby field. Even then, he still feels uneasy about the whole situation. Apparently, the doors were still locked from the inside and there was no real sign of anyone trying to break in. Just a few extra details I thought I should add. The police did breathalyze for alcohol and it came up clear. Even more unsettling is that he puts his keys in the same place every night, which is next to his handgun in one of those metal boxes, which remained untouched. Also, the police officers could not locate where the man in the jumpsuit was, or could have gone. It was an open field with no building in sight. And they didn't actually stop the truck or see it moving. The only reason they decided to check on the truck was because of a call they received from a worried woman. Everyone was weirded out, couldn't really issue any real fines, so they let my boyfriend leave. 2 stories. Maybe not winners, but creepy overnight parking for sure. I was really new to the business and had parked at a stop in Texas en route from one place to another. It was August. There was nothing unusual about the situation. I was in the middle of a parking lot with about 70 other odd truckers. I woke up with a start 6 hours later to the truck shaking and rolling, hellacious noise all around, and a psychedelic light show blasting me from every direction. It was a severe thunderstorm that I'd no idea was coming. Wind, pounding rain, thunder, and lightning to beat hell. Being in a truck during a storm is closer to being in a tent than in a house. I'd never experienced it before, and even though I grew up with this kind of severe weather, I lay there in this tossing, heaving sensory party going, I don't even know where I'd go right now to get safe if I had to. Hell, I don't even know how to find out if this is a severe or regular or a tornado. I was really tired the next morning. I parked for the night somewhere in southwest Michigan on the way to Grand Rapids. Again, a truck stop full of trucks. Shut down and went to bed. I woke up looking at one of the cabin lights, which was on. I think, fell asleep with the lights on again, genius. Then, freeze. The light I'm looking at only comes on if you deliberately turn it on, which I never did. Or if the door is open. Just then, I felt the slight roll of the cab that's telltale whenever someone is climbing up. I wish I had some heroic Rambo crap I could claim I did, but I can't. I yelled. Now, I can make myself heard in a very loud environment pretty easily, and this was the dead of a quiet night. and I yelled, "Get out!" loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs. There was a frenzied scrambling and the truck rocked some more. Then I hear a very small woman's voice, "I'm sorry, I got the wrong truck." Nothing from me for a second, then, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just get the F out of here." Moral of that story, lock your doors. She was either a driver or a working girl, and it doesn't matter because either way, she got the wrong truck. Loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs is my new and favorite way to say something is the extreme opposite of silence. I was at the Petro in western Memphis. I had dropped a loaded trailer and bobtailed to the truck stop and parked in bobtail parking at the Petro. I was pretty tired but hungry, so I went in, got a meal and walked out and opened the door to my truck and started climbing up. I looked up right into the face of a guy grinning at me. I was in the wrong truck. I had parked next to him. We both drove for the same mega carrier, so the trucks were identical. He had watched me go in and knew what was up. We both had a good laugh about it, and I went to my truck and crashed. If the storyteller is anything like me, the realization of the mistake was probably preceded by at least 20 seconds of high-pitched screaming when he climbed into bed to a grinning face. No, thank you. A couple years ago, I was sleeping in my van in North Hollywood after getting off of work. I had the seat folded down and a long plywood plank with a mattress on top of them. So I was elevated at the windows level, but they were tinted. Woke up one night and was startled by a guy standing outside staring into the van and talking to himself. I realized he wasn't trying to look in, but was looking at his reflection. I don't know how long he had been there, but he was there for another 15 minutes until he staggered off. Have a trucker story from the extended family. An uncle used to drive a lot, and he always came back with the most weird stories ever. While every family member knew his stories, there was one story he told and warned about, even to me when I was 6 or so. Moral of the story is to never stay the night in the desert alone. It seems once he drove to Chile, he had a contract, and the way there was okay. I made the travel myself later in life. It's beautiful. Whenever he was done, he usually spent a few bucks on booze, but this time, due to the family gathering, he wanted to come back as soon as possible. So instead of drinking in some bar, he decided to sleep a bit at the Atacama Desert. Well, it's a desert and he had parked way outside the road and a few miles before the next village. He sleeps and wakes up to someone singing. He's confused and thinks it's the radio, but the radio is not on. Then the singing stops and it sounds more like a scream for help. That's when he wants to get out and help, but he is still confused. He said he started the motor and the lights to see where and who was there, but he also did open the window a bit and yelled, asking what happened. It was nothing, and right then when he decides to get out anyway, he catches a movement in the corner of where the lights end. It looked like a woman, but the face was pitch dark. He freaks out and drives away, non-stop until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story, his face went pale. Even my grandmother commented on how he was usually a very jolly guy, but whatever happened in the Atacama Desert freaked him totally out. Like most people here, this didn't happen to me. One of my good friends from middle school had a stepfather who was a truck driver for a good amount of time. He was a tough son of a B-word. I never saw him not look like he could kill someone. Except one time when he told us why he stopped driving trucks. He was on a long trip from somewhere down in Texas to Boise, Idaho. By the time he hit the freeway close to Boise, he had already been up for 24 hours. Either way, I don't believe he could have seen this coming. Outside of Boise, he was driving, late at night, at the fastest legal speed, when out of nowhere he sees someone sit up straight in the middle of the road. He didn't have enough time to hit the brakes, not that it would have helped. She was decapitated on the spot. He later found out she was tweaked out. I don't think even if he wasn't sleep deprived, he would have seen her lying in the road. From what the police could gather, she walked out there, sat down, and eventually fell asleep in the road. No one knows who she was or how she got that far out. One of my trucker friends has a story about spending the night alone in a rural stop in the middle of Maine winter. She had a bit of an uneasy feeling about the place but couldn't put her finger on anything and needed badly to rest, so she stayed. Perfect Stephen King setup, right? She's usually a very solid sleeper but wakes up around 3 a.m. that night. She's not sure what woke her up, until she notices that the cab is very slowly and gently rocking side to side. She can also hear an intermittent, soft sort of rubbing sound that corresponds with the rocking. She was a seasoned trucker already at this point, but really wasn't sure what this was, and all the ideas that came to mind ranged from the mundane, but alarmingly unsavory, to the outright paranormal. Terrified, she creeps up to look in the side view mirror to see what's out there. Turns out some moose like to lick the road salt off semi-trucks. I hope that cow from the earlier story feels really validated by this factoid. Not a trucker, but I drive a lot of miles in a company truck from my oil field company. I'm on call 24/7, so I'm out at all hours. One night after a long day on a location in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which is rather remote and sparsely populated, I was driving back to the town where my shop is located. I got too sleepy to drive and decided to pull over and to nap until the sun came up. So I pulled off the 2-lane highway down a country road and parked on the other side of that road. It's safer than pulling off on the shoulder of the highway, and no headlights to bother you. This was and is common practice for me. I left my pickup running and turned the headlights off and leaned my seat back and fell asleep pretty quick with the AC on low and the radio turned off. I slept pretty good for maybe an hour, and then I guess I was having strange dreams, so I woke up, but just kept laying there because I was groggy. The wind was picking up and sort of shaking the truck with random strong gusts. Lots of wind in Oklahoma. Eventually, I started to imagine I was hearing whispering or murmurs, but I attributed it to the wind and my sleepy state, or maybe the radio still being on but low volume. I kept hearing it, so I sat up and turned the headlights back on to look around. The lights illuminated the dirt road to my side and in front of me, about 50 feet in front of my truck and extending down the road into the dark where my headlights faded out, were maybe 20 coyotes all milling around and sniffing around the gravel in the road. Their eyes were reflecting the lights. Coyotes usually run from light and avoid humans and their noise at all costs. There was no fear in these coyotes, and I was sort of struck by how many they were, all standing in the road. They eventually moved off into the dark as a group. I wasn't really afraid as I was inside my truck, but my feeling was an uneasy one, so I got back on the highway and went home. After reading through a majority of the comments on this thread, my curiosity was piqued, and I called my mum up to ask her if my great-grandfather, a trucker during the 60s, had ever told a creepy story of being on the road. To my surprise, she said there was one story he told her as a cautionary tale. It's not about parking overnight somewhere, but I thought it might fit in here just the same. He said he was driving through somewhere pretty rural, a small town with a few houses here and there. As he was making his way down the road, he saw a large cardboard box tumble down a hill and come to a stop pretty much directly in his path on the road. It was too late for him to brake, but why would he? It was just a cardboard box. It's not like it would hurt his truck if he ran over it, so he kept chugging forward. At nearly the last second, he said something came over him, and he immediately swerved to the right to avoid hitting the box. When he looked in his rearview mirror, he saw 2 little kids scramble out of the box and back up the hill. It's amazing what little kids in a small town will do for fun. I still feel sick to my stomach after hearing my mum tell that story. All the time. The worst might have been an incident that happened while back in Indiana. I was just parked for a 34-hour reset, means you can't drive for 34 hours so you can get a full 70 hours of driving back. It's the hours of service that allows us to drive and counts our hours, just outside of Chicago. Now, for all you non-truck drivers, right out of Chicago in Indiana is probably the first place you learn about not stopping if you can. Drug dealers, lot lizards, working girls, theft, the whole 9 yards. I didn't have a choice. I had nothing left at all for hours. So I sat. That night, I heard someone messing with my truck in the back. I sat in my truck while I heard this continue for 2 hours. I would much rather deal with it in the morning than go out to see what's going on and getting robbed at weapon point. Woke up the following morning to see my 5th wheel handle pulled. Means if I drove, I would have unintentionally dropped my trailer I had attached, and my glad hands, the lines that connect my truck to my trailer that provide me with braking capabilities, completely missing. Worst of all, they undid my frickin' catwalk like savages and ran away with it. My father-in-law is a trucker in Australia. He told me a story one night in the middle of the outback. Not a soul in sight and hundreds of kilometers between towns. Australia is huge, especially on the west coast where we are. Pitch black night, a tire blows out. He pulls out to the shoulder and starts the task of changing. Feeling uneasy, he keeps looking over his shoulders. Something isn't right. Working fast, telling himself to stop being a scaredy cat. Then, all of a sudden, a hand lands on his shoulder. "Hey there, mate. You have a spare smoke?" An Aboriginal man was right next to him like it was a normal thing. In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. He says, "Nah, mate, I don't smoke." So the man just walks away into the darkness. He reckons he aged about 20 years that night. Nothing too creepy, but I've parked in a few less than desirable places. The first was next to P&G in Kansas City on the edge of the ghetto. Nothing happened, but it was still freaky at the time because I was fairly new. Yes, I've had a couple of bums or lot lizards knock on my truck, but if you stay quiet, they just move on. I've heard random bumps in the night, but never really worried about it. I heard a story about a police officer in Chicago or New York making a trucker move his truck so that he didn't have to deal with a homicide in the morning. What is it about Chicago in particular here? Adding that onto my list of places to avoid for future travel. Let's get back to spooky. I was driving overnight in a very low-populated area. Due to circumstances, I was seriously sleep-deprived. Driving in a poorly lit stretch of woods, my headlights started to cast shadows through the rails on the side of the road and started playing on the trees on either side. It looked and felt like I was driving across an ocean. Then the hallucinations started. When you are seriously sleep-deprived, you'll start to see shadows flicking across the edges of your field of vision. Shadowy figures started appearing on the water next to the road, swimming alongside me. They looked like monstrous mermaids jumping in and out of the water. The Dutch roads are notorious for having very few truck stops that actually have space for a real truck. So I drove for another hour taunted by these figures. First truck stop I pull into and ready myself for a nap. I wake up a couple of hours later and one of the figures was in the cab with me, looking at me. I freeze, terrified for my life. I couldn't move until I calmed down enough to start noticing that while it seems to be moving and breathing, it doesn't seem to move much. And then I realize it was my coat, slung across the seat. Panic subsided and I used the adrenaline rush to drive the 2 more hours I had to go. Other time, less spooky but creepy enough, a truck stop I was parked at was infested with lot lizards. I had already seen some of the less lizardy types get into trucks. I was reading a book when suddenly I hear my handle of the passenger door being pulled. It was locked, luckily, but that didn't stop the unseen puller try to open it. It stops for a second and I suddenly feel the cab swinging a bit, like someone was on the ladder. Up comes this horrible visage of rotting, missing teeth with a balding forehead and so much eyeliner it could be called face liner. She mimes giving me a particular adult activity, but I refuse. She jumps off and I see her storming off, furious about something. Most of the other truckers were laughing at me. She was well known amongst the local truckers for her wiles. This is the scariest story here. Not because of the hallucinations themselves, but because I learned I may be sharing the road with people who are operating 40-ton vehicles at 60 miles an hour while severely sleep-deprived. I used to drive trucks in northern Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast you can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. This road is quite flat and straight in stretches. Of course, this is deep in the bush. One day I saw something cross the road in the distance. Very large, easily past the hood on my truck. But not long like a moose or elk, just tall. It disappeared into the bush, and as I drove by the spot, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard days later a tow truck driver describing on the radio his encounter with a similar creature. Only he was much more clear that he had spotted Bigfoot. This guy went to some length to explain he didn't want people thinking he was crazy, but he was sure what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community, and he said the elders spoke of them as commonly the same way they spoke of other animals. I don't know what I saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what the hell it was. What is the best "karma is a B word" moment you have witnessed? I'm from San Diego, and during the summer you have to claim bonfire pits on the beach really early in the morning if you want it for that night. So my friends and I got to the beach at 8 a.m. and stayed there so we can get a bonfire going into the night. Just before sundown, this one couple asked if they could share the bonfire with us, and since our group wasn't too big, we decided to share it with them. However, that couple proceeded to bring a group of about 15 others, and they literally surrounded the pit and pushed us out. We were really annoyed, but we were so tired from being at the beach all day, so we decided to head out. Little did we know that that night had an extreme high tide warning, and when we moved all of our stuff over the wall that divided the beach walk with the beach, a huge wave came in and washed out that whole group surrounding our bonfire. The wave flipped over their table of food, took a handful of sandals back into the ocean, and destroyed all of their stuff. The best part was this one girl was trying to jump the wall to save herself, but she didn't jump high enough and ended up falling right back into the water. Karma is a B word. I was in daycare as a child. I had very long hair that my dad always put into a ponytail. There was a girl that would pull my ponytail all the time. We were doing a musical chairs thing at the end of the day while parents were picking us up. The girl was behind me and kept yanking my ponytail. I kept telling her to stop. The teacher
Didn't see anything, so I can't do anything about it.
There were a bunch of parents waiting for us to finish our game, my mum included, and she kept doing it and the teacher
Didn't see it.
So I turned around and punched her as hard as I could. She stumbled into the cubbies where we kept our coats. The teacher tried to chastise me, and my mum was like, "Nope, didn't even see anything. Didn't even get into trouble." I was running laps on a grass field in the military when I was about to lap a guy who'd always lap the crap out of me. So as I passed him, I yelled, "Gotcha, B-word," and immediately stepped in a hole in the ground and twisted my ankle. Despite the pain of jacking my ankle up, I thought the karmic payout was hilariously timed. That fool. YouTube fail videos have long since established that taunting your opponent seconds before the finish line basically guarantees some kind of karmic payback. My old manager was a monster, belittled people, made a hostile environment, denied everything that would make coworkers happy while giving herself every comfort, even denied me a half day to go to my mother's funeral, adding, "Would it be a big deal if you couldn't go?" He finally stepped on his own member after he wrote up a fictitious counseling statement about someone and the entire office revolted. The manager wasn't fired like we wanted, but he was relieved. So in comes the new manager. Very well regarded, 20-year Air Force veteran, retired at E9, humble guy who knew how to handle people. We have our first awkward team meeting, old manager bitterly in attendance. As the new manager is giving his "nice to meet you" speech, he sees the D-bag glancing around the table, trying to intimidate people. He stops talking, pauses for a few seconds, and then says, "You know, when I was in the Air Force, I learned that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you." He then stared directly at the old manager and said, "If you don't take care of your people, they'll take care of you." Sitting on a state highway late at night because of a bad car accident. The highway was packed and barely moving. One guy thinks he's smarter than everyone else and tries to drive on the shoulder. He makes it a good little ways before running into an on-ramp, also packed with cars. He had nowhere to go and no one let him in. He was stuck between cars in the rightmost lanes and cars from the on-ramp. Everyone stuck bumper to bumper and flowed around him. I went from watching him pass me and almost getting out of my view to passing him and losing sight of him in my rear view mirror. My dad told me a story once from when he was younger. He was in traffic in a two-lane, two-way road. It was backed up in one direction, heading into an event of sorts, but there was sparse traffic going the other way. My father starts seeing this tool in his rear view who would pull out from the traffic into the oncoming lane, drive as far as he could before a car started to approach from the other direction, and then get someone to let him back in. After doing this a few times, he gets up to my father when he needs to get back in. My father doesn't budge, and the guy has to throw it in reverse and back all the way up to the end of the line. Of all the fantastic things my father's done in his life, and all the lessons he's taught me, if I've taken one thing away, it's that I will never let that guy in. I love highway justice. My husband and I like to call people like that the D-word of the mile, because there's always one. As much as all the other figures on this compendium deserve the karmic justice they were handed, these individuals who believe the rules of the road apply to literally everyone but themselves are particularly satisfying, aren't they? When I was a kid, we visited Montreal. I had gotten a hockey puck as a souvenir. While we were in our hotel, my sister decided to mess with me by hiding it. I got mad and yelled in my high-pitched voice, "Give me back my hockey puck!" before smacking her in the head with a pillow. Guess where she had hidden it? As a parent, I don't even think I could get mad for that. I was coming out of work from a nightclub in New York City in 1993. A friend and I were walking toward the train station when we heard an older lady screaming, "Help! Help!" We saw a guy running away from the screams toward us with a woman's purse in his hand. I don't know why I did this, but I pulled out my work ID badge. Plain work badge, not a security badge. I was just the DJ. The thief must have thought I was a cop, and he immediately throws his hands in the air, and without a struggle he throws himself to the floor. I told him to stay laying on the floor or he will be pepper sprayed. I had no pepper spray. A few minutes later, the cops show up and arrest him. The old lady was very grateful and was mostly worried about her pictures of her family she had in her purse. Bad guy got instant karma and didn't even get halfway down the block with the purse. Driving to Chicago, and a crazy guy is road raging, swerving erratically while yelling about shooting us. He zooms off. 5 or so miles later, we see his van upside down in the ditch. He's standing on the shoulder talking to a cop. You should have pulled over and said, "Hey, about you threatening to shoot me back there. Sorry, but you were going so fast I couldn't keep up. But hey, you're welcome to give it a shot now." I got rear-ended in a turn lane by a girl texting. She was doing 45 miles per hour, and I was stopped. No major injuries. I went to her court date hoping she got a big fine or something. She got a $50 ticket. I was a little bit upset. As I was sitting at the stoplight to pull out of the court, I watched her run a red light and T-bone a cop. I don't normally laugh at other people's misfortunes, however, I laughed my butt off on that one. When I was driving my Jeep very carefully in a snowstorm and someone in a Mustang passed me in an unsafe manner, he almost lost control of his car, which would have caused an accident that included me. Picture someone dangerously fishtailing right in front of you with an 18-wheeler coming at you in the other lane. Saw him in the ditch 5 minutes later. Idiot. Seems like he started as he meant to go on. I suppose I really should have guessed how many of these were going to be car and road related. Here's a similar story with a dash more coincidence involved. This same thing happened to me in London with a sudden snow flurry. I was driving down a hill and my car was sliding towards parked cars, so I was taking it slow. The guy behind me was driving a Land Rover and tooting at me to hurry up. Ended up overtaking me at speed. Got home a few minutes later and the guy is sitting on my garden wall with a gash on his head. His car had crashed into the central bollards. I asked him if he wanted to come in and wait for the emergency services, but he was too embarrassed. Couldn't help myself and told him he was driving too fast. He said he thought Land Rovers were made to handle those conditions. I work in an ER, and once a girl got brought in by an ambulance after being assaulted. She was walking down the street when some guy tackled her to the ground and tried to drag her down an alley. A good Samaritan managed to chase him off and call the cops. Like 20 minutes later, they brought in a guy in full cardiac arrest. Turns out the police found the attacker and chased him several blocks to where he collapsed, and his heart gave out. He was dead on arrival and the victim ID'd him right in the ER. I was kicking a customer out for being racist and cursing at one of the employees. He yelled offensive stuff and then he tried to slam the door on his way out, but it had one of those things that make the door close slowly. He pushed it hard, but it didn't budge and he slipped and fell on the floor. We had a good laugh. The correct name for that thing is a door slowly closer.
A door slowerer?
Americans call boingy deceleratory hallway blockers door slowly closers. When my ex-husband who stole $4,000 from me to go visit his mistress in another country called me to beg for money. Actually, my credit card number, as if, because his lights got cut off. The other day, I was taking my dog for a walk around the neighborhood. She squatted down to take a poop, and I reached for my doggy bags only to realize I was fresh out. So I peeked around, making sure nobody was looking, and I just left it. 10 minutes later, I'm walking across the road, and I cut through a thin grass median in the center, and what do you know? I step in dog poop. I wasn't even mad. I knew I deserved it. When I was in my first grade, my class had recess, and this bully pushed me to the ground. I fell and was about to go off on the kid when this fourth grader came over, lifted the kid up, and took the kid over to the principal. Karma is the best. A very similar thing happened to me when I was in first grade, but there were a few key differences. The bully wasn't alone. There were 3 second graders, one of whom was the leader. I kicked his goons' butts before he took me on himself. They started it. I was on the monkey bars and they came up under me and started twisting my legs, so I fell. The guy who ended up saving me was in 3rd grade, not 4th. He didn't take the bully to the principal, just carried him a few feet away and dropped him. The guy who came to help me was my brother, which was interesting because he was usually the one giving me a hard time. It's the older brother Maxim. The only people that can beat up on my younger brother is me. I was at a party one time, and this one girl couldn't stop talking crap about this other girl that was coming to the party. The other girl shows up, and this dude picked her up and hugged her and spun her around in a way where her foot kicked the girl that was talking crap right in the face while she was sitting on the couch. Her beer spilled all over her, and she caught a black eye. Every script or so, there is one story in particular that causes the narrator to spit out his drink all over the screen, laugh outrageously in public, or have to stop for a solid 5 seconds while he wheezes with laughter. This was that story. Happened to me at work. Meth Head was trying to pay with like 1,000 coins for a $5 scratch-off. She tried to say she was only 10 cents short, ended up being over $1 short, then complained and said any decent person would have spotted her the money. Pretty much told her she could go down the street and try there if she'd like. She pulled out a 20 and bought 2. As she walked out the store, she said, "Karma is a B word." When she got to her car, a cop pulls up behind, blocking her in. They proceed to search the car, then arrest her and her boyfriend. It was hilarious. F her. So let me get this straight. She tried to buy a scratch-off using a bunch of coins, got mad when nobody gave her $1, and then pulled a 20? F that B word. A classmate in school broke one of his legs and was using crutches. He was about to go down the stairs and another kid kicked one of his crutches down the stairs. I walked down there and got his crutch for him, and while walking back up, the kid who kicked the crutches came tumbling down and I moved out the way. The kid broke his arm. Did you hear that?
Yeah, it sounded like someone fell down the stairs.
No, it was actually the sound of sweet, sexy karma returning the favor. Last Saturday, I was on a crowded NYC subway at 2 a.m. Two drunk dudes, young 20s, lighting a joint and walking around flaunting it. One literally came up to me. "You think a weedhead ain't gonna smoke a joint?" Whatever that means. The whole train kept ignoring them and they kept parading around being a bunch of morons. They spotted two taller, athletic-looking dudes and started making fun of them for looking like cops. It was the line, "Which of you is the sergeant?" that finally put the athletic guys over the edge. They looked at each other, smiled, reached into their pocket, and pulled out their badges. "Okay, boys, empty your pockets." The subway blew up in laughter. They would have gotten away with everything if they just didn't go bother the two plainclothes police officers. Score one for the good guys. And then I went home and smoked up a joint myself in my living room. I worked as a bartender at a bowling alley. For some reason, one of the other bartenders hated me. She was constantly poaching people on my side, horseshoe-shaped bar, so we each got a side. We split tips, and whenever it was her turn to count them down, I know she wasn't splitting them properly. Tried to get the scheduling manager to put her on my days, etc. One of my regulars even said she caught her pocketing tips and not putting them in our communal bucket while I was working with her. Well, tournament season started, which everyone dreaded/looked forward to. Dreaded because the shifts were twice or 3 times as long as normal, and there was a constant rush of people at the bar. Looked forward to because shifts were 2 or 3 times as long as normal, and there was a constant rush at the bar, so we'd make about as much in a day as we did in a week. Well, the first tournament was teams that she considered hers. They bowled on her side on days she worked, so she knew them well and was looking forward to their tournament tips. She came in, saw that I was scheduled to bartend that day, and flipped out. She started ranting to the manager, who happened to be the scheduling manager. The owner pretty much said I was one of the better bartenders, so I was getting put on the tournaments, and if she didn't like it, she could just leave. My co-worker left, and then I got to work her normal shifts as well. I was working in a pub in Liverpool and had just arrived about 10 a.m. to start my shift. I knocked on the door and waited for someone to let me in. I became aware of some voices shouting and turned around to see 2 guys, shirts off, swaggering towards me, talking in a language I didn't understand. They came right up to me and whatever little English they did speak came out. They called me a frickin' working girl and a frickin' B-word, etc. Nasty stuff, and I was really quite scared. I was knocking on the door really hard at this point, but after insulting me and laughing, they walked off towards a busy road. I watched as they walked out into the traffic, waving their arms at the cars to stop for them, then giving the drivers the finger. Suddenly, one of the cars stopped and 4 big guys got out. One of the nasty dudes ran off, but the big man got caught and shoved hard against the car a couple of times, clearly hurting his head and elbow. Then one of the guys made out that he was going to punch him, big time, drawing his fist far back. The little crap just covered his face and screamed. They didn't get hit, but the car guys and a lot of passers-by burst out laughing. They let him go and he ran away. That felt good. Nothing better than watching highway vigilante justice from the comfort of your own vehicle, huh? I hope at least some of the drivers had a packet of crisps to consume with the show. My dad kicked our dog because it was standing in front of the fridge and he wanted a beer. But as soon as he opened the fridge, the shelf that was holding the beer fell off and every single can busted open. Woman on a cell phone runs me off the road, flips me off for laying on the horn. She was going right and I was a ways back going left. A van was in front of her at the red light and she just plows into the back of it. I slowed down as I passed with the window down. Running me off the road wasn't enough to get your attention, huh? She flips out. I laugh and drive off into the sunset. You might have considered giving your contact information to the driver of the van. I was a witness, I saw her talking on her phone while driving, and saw her ram into your stopped vehicle, and will be happy to tell the same to your insurance company. My brother was making fun of an old man slowly shuffling across a parking lot. Look at Speedy Gonzales, or something, and 2 seconds after, he, my brother, bashes his foot on the cement parking barrier. He limped back to the car as I laughed hysterically. Every winter when my family and I would go skiing, if it was snowing on our drive up or back, there'd be an idiot soccer mom or dad Driving a Suburban on worn-out all seasons, going 50 plus in the snowy lane, not the one people are driving in. It's always incredibly satisfying seeing them either pulled over or in the ditch. I made the mistake of pulling them out twice. Never again. They are never grateful and never admit they're an idiot for driving so fast. The last one, once I got them out and unhooked them, jumped in the Suburban and in order to make it move on the snow, floored it, achieving not much more than throwing snow behind them and making their already bad tires worse. I was working at a mental health facility for the elderly as a nurse, worked there for over a year with a perfect work record. I worked for the same company at another elderly facility, also for the same amount of time with a perfect work record. My coworker found out I have PTSD and decided to tell my boss at the psych facility that I have PTSD, and the two together plotted to have me committed. One day in October 2012, they launched their attack. I was working a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift and doing very well for 2 hours when my boss called me into her office to congratulate me on 1 year's service. When we were in her office alone, she started grilling me about my mental health and how it plays out at home. Next thing I know, she's forcing me to call my coworker, who is off duty, and making me go with her to the psych emergency because I have PTSD. The entire meeting was designed to stress me out and caused me to be triggered enough to behave poorly or crazy somehow to rationalize the next step, which was to cart me off to an emergency, and when they see me, they will instantly know I belong locked away in a padded room. They didn't, though. The hospital said I was fine, just stressed out about being forced to go to the hospital like a crazy person for no reason other than admitting I had PTSD. After the hospital let me go, my boss put me on extended medical leave without telling me and ignored all my calls for 2 weeks. Wrote letters lying about me to her bosses and the HR department. I filed a union grievance and a complaint with a third-party whistleblower company for my company's head office to hear about. My boss lied about me to everyone. She said I told her I had a murderer in my head, that I was standing in front of mirrors with knives wanting to cut flesh. They believed her, so they shut down my complaints. I took it to the Human Rights Tribunal, self-represented, against the largest long-term care provider in North America, and I fricking won. Took 3 long years from incidents to end of court. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. My employer's health declined considerably by the time the trial happened. She lost her job, she had to move to the mainland, and there is a forever public record about what she did. The coworker who helped my boss is in the permanent record, and the employees of the job site were ordered to learn what she and our boss had done to me and the outcome. She will never be comfortable at that job site again, and who and what she is known to all. I got the highest amount awarded for damages to dignity and self. I created a precedent for other PTSD persons with a clean work history who do a good job on the clock but have very real struggles with PTSD symptoms at home. No karma could possibly taste better than $40K and a clean reputation. What are some double standards that don't involve gender? When I was a little kid, if I left my toys out and one of my parents stepped on one, I got yelled at for leaving my toys all over the place. But if my parents left their tools out and I stepped on one, I got yelled at for not watching where I was stepping. I always find it amusing that when I purchase chemicals for my company, I can order some real crazy stuff, or stuff that can be used to do/make or synthesize crazy stuff, without raising an eyebrow or having to submit documentation or business records. Because, hey, we've got an account, so it must be legit. But when I order good old 99.9% pure ethanol, which is really cheap for us because it's tax exempt since we're using it for industrial purposes rather than drinking it for entertainment, there's a mountain of additional paperwork attesting to the above. When I went to Japan, I was heckled by my friends if I went and had American food. Yet, when the same group of friends went out to Japanese guests here in the States, we always only went out to Japanese food. WTF? Seriously, I got American food when I lived in Thailand about once or twice a month, which is nothing compared to the 30-plus days in a month and 3 meals a day, but I would just be judged by the locals and even some foreigners for stepping into a McD for a hash brown and sausage and egg McMuffin. Like, leave me alone, fam. I'm homesick and I don't want to sweat from the burning spice of last night's leftover curry at 8 a.m. when it's already 33 degrees, 91 in freedom units, outside. When I have a lot of experience at a job application, like they asked for, but the employer thinks I'm too old for the job. My parents say that our generation only does stuff so that we can take a picture and post it, and then whenever we go to do something, my parents take a ton of pictures so they can post them. My mother rants and raves about technology a crap ton. She's the epitome of the good old days, yet 90% of her time is Facebooking on her phone. My parents are the same way. They used to be big sticklers for little to no technology, didn't have a gaming system until late middle school, didn't have internet until high school, didn't get my first smartphone until college. But now, my parents are the ones with the most tech, and my dad makes at least 1 to 2 posts to Facebook a day. My brother and I, both in our 20s, have to pry my dad away from his iPad to join us for our family's meals or watch a movie together. My boyfriend's graduation ceremony was this past Saturday, and my dad was responding to emails and Facebook posts throughout the event. It's quite funny when we call him out on it too, because he says, "I'm just answering some emails," or responding to Facebook posts. So he's entirely self-aware that he's doing it, but in his mind, it's justified. I've always found my parents' tech habits more funny and cute than anything. I can see these people's points though. At least growing up, my parents' technophobia got me out of the house a bit more than I might have got otherwise. Employers who expect you to stay late for hours of overtime on their whim, but get mad if you're even 5 minutes late in the morning. If I'm flexible for them, I think it's fair to be flexible for me. Such a nitpicky thing to destroy morale when it's already so bad from being forced to work late. Luckily, that was my old job, and I'm in a better place now. Bad parenting on their kid versus other people's kids.
But my kid is special.
Oh yes, I'm a twin with incredible parents. My middle school bully was a twin with terrible parents. They were twin sisters and would fight constantly in class. Like embarrassing screaming matches. My twin brother and I always got along, mostly due to his kindness and compassion through my moody and volatile adolescence. I was straight up B-word to him most of the time. However, we obviously fought sometimes. Once we were having a small argument in the hallway. I was accusing him of taking my silly bands to give to his little girlfriend, or some middle school drama thing, and my bully's mother, who was the superintendent of my school, called my parents and told them my brother and I were fighting at school and needed to be controlled. She didn't even approach us first. She could have definitely broken up our little argument by just talking to us. We weren't screaming or even talking very loud. I was just very clearly mad at him. I don't know if she saw the argument herself, or if one of her daughters told her we were fighting or something. Meanwhile, her kids interrupted half of class every day, and they didn't even get sent to the office. Cities and states telling us to conserve water by watering less. Some people comply and they end up getting fined by their city for having a dead or dying lawn. City and state buildings have the greenest lawns around because they water around the clock. Early morning, high noon, and the evening. Half the sprinklers are usually overspraying in the middle of the road. How about cities and states telling citizens to conserve water, then selling the water rights to major corporations or factory farms for almost nothing? I'll cut down my showers when you stop selling the state's water to gosh darn Nestle. Celebrity overdoses. Oh, such a tragedy. Addiction is a disease. When anybody else overdoses, ugh. Gosh darn junkie, what did they expect to happen? Poor and weird equals weirdo. Rich and weird equals eccentric. Also, rich people don't commit crimes, they make mistakes. Unless the controversy becomes so large that it's threatening the reputation of other rich people. Then some of the offenders will be publicly ostracized and will be told that they fixed systematic issues. Bonus points if they make a heartfelt public apology on some talk show and restart their career. Celebrity worship overall just makes me angry. Yeah, when you think about it, there's a lot of people locked away who just sort of had the misfortune to not be rich and famous at the time. Tall people get more opportunities, get promoted easier, and generally make more than average or short people. Tall and pretty? Oh yeah.
What about pretty ugly?
Definitely true. However, the research on looks and strangers' opinions of you is strong. In fact, I don't even recommend Googling it because it can be depressing to see how something like appearance influences so many people's opinions of individuals they know nothing about, from which politicians people vote for to who gets hired for executive positions. Different side of the same coin, I can resonate with this so much. Not on a personal level so much, but I have had quite a number of conversations with co-workers who expressed their dislike of another fairly new co-worker. Their reasoning varied, but generally it was, "He just thinks he is so good or better than us." The guy in question was good-looking, young, but more importantly, was into bodybuilding, so he took care of himself and only ate his specified meals. The amount of middle-aged women that said they didn't like him just because they thought he was up himself was amazing. If I'm on my phone, people will almost always leave me alone. If I'm reading, they want to ask me what I'm reading and interrupt me, even though they can see the cover of the book. Which, if I wanted to talk, would I be reading? When I was a kid, I used to be allowed to read a book while around family at family gatherings. But when I got a Game Boy and played with that, I was told off for being unsociable. Except, I'm very dyslexic, and when I read, I am completely unable to hear anything, even someone calling my name. I could play on my Game Boy and hold a conversation at the same time. Adults will always whine about children enjoying the latest technology. I'm generally expected to give 2 weeks' notice if I'm going to be quitting a job. However, if said job wants to get rid of me, they can do it with absolutely no notice, and often with a bullcrap reason. That one depends on the country. In Canada, unless there is just cause, with extensive proof of written warnings, attempts at retraining or proof of a serious incident, the company is legally required to pay a period of notice depending on how long you've been there or your skill level, or allow them to continue working for that long. It's always amazing to me that even the US doesn't have laws like this in place to protect employees. Respect is earned. I deserve respect. Depends on what you mean by respect. I should treat you like another worthy human being? Okay. I should treat you like some sort of authority? F no. Rabbits and any other pet. I had a black mini, Rex, and she was the most intelligent rabbit I've ever had. She was litter trained, did tricks like standing up, kisses, and came when you called her name only as long as she felt like it. But whenever I'd talk to her about people like they talk about their dog or cat, people look at me like I'm mad. People always ask each other about how their dog or cat is, but start talking about a rabbit and they lose complete interest. When I told them how much I spent on the vets a few times she's been ill, I've had some people say, "Why don't you just get a new one?" Because it's a living thing. Another rabbit we got from a pet store turned out she had some problems, and the manager of the store said, "Why don't you return her and swap her for another one?" How about get lost? She's a living creature that didn't ask to be here. Some people need to understand that there are a lot more to rabbits than meets the eye. Being bilingual, specifically speaking English and another language. In most of the world, I'm considered intelligent and sophisticated if I speak more than one language, even if I speak with an accent. In the States, speaking a second language, especially if I have an accent, gets me disrespected as a stubborn, non-acclimated immigrant. Oof, I feel this one. There's nothing more frustrating than having people speak to you as if you're a child, even though you're an educated, well-read person with a speaking handicap in the current situation. Narrator rant over. If I finish a 9 to 5 and want a glass of wine after work to relax, that's perfectly normal. If I'm working a night shift and want a glass of wine after work to relax, I must have a drinking problem because it's 8 a.m. and I'm opening a bottle of rosé. You're supposed to drink Bloody Mary before 10 a.m. Once the clock has 4 numbers on it, all bets are off. The need to respect your elders even when they abuse that privilege and treat young people disrespectfully. If you want respect, you need to show respect. Sometimes people use respect to mean treating someone like a person, and sometimes they use respect to mean treating someone like an authority. And sometimes people who are used to being treated like an authority say, "If you won't respect me, I won't respect you." And they mean, "If you won't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a person." And they think they're being fair, but they aren't. And it's not okay. Pretty good quote. Old enough to join the military and go to war, but not old enough to buy a beer. Laughs in German. Professors will have very strict due dates on students, but will wait until the last week of the semester to finally give back our grades from our first presentation. Or they waste half a frickin' hour trying to figure out how to use the projector. If I have trouble with my laptop or submitting an essay, it's TS. The federal government putting green herb at the same level as crystal, white powder, and smack. Meanwhile, alcohol and tobacco are available in stores everywhere. What's worse is that actually, according to the drug scheduling system, Mary J is set at a higher class than white powder and crystal. Schedule 1 is supposed to be reserved for substances that can cause harm and have no medical usage. White powder is on Schedule 2 because it has a medical use, namely as an anesthetic, and it can help stop bleeding. Crystal is also a Schedule 2 because forms of amphetamine are used in ADHD medication. I don't agree with green herb being Schedule 1 for many reasons, but especially because it doesn't even meet the criteria for it. It's a catch-22. Weed is S1 because it has no medical uses. It has no medical uses because those medical uses can't be researched. It can't be researched because it's S1. Same goes for harm. A lot of this has been changing recently, though. At my old job, there was this lady in her 50s who would say whatever was on her mind, even making fun of the managers or policies during meetings for everyone to hear. Yet I, female 22, say one sassy thing and I need to learn to watch my mouth. Yep, seems fair. This was just a generic retail job and this lady had only worked there for like 5 years versus the 3 years I'd worked there. So I definitely think it was solely her age that let her get away with it. Oldest children never get away with anything, but they see their younger siblings not getting punished for the same things they would have been excoriated for. I'm the youngest of 3, with a massive age gap between me and my 2 siblings. Yet, when my sister was a grade A C-word to me, daily, she's a frickin' psycho, guess who got punished and guess who got absolutely no consequences whatsoever? I'll give you a clue. It wasn't her getting told off. I think we forget it can just as easily go the other way. I feel like the debate on whether older or younger siblings have it tougher is as old as time itself and will go on forever. I know me and my siblings are still having it into our adult years. If a dog doesn't like someone, that person's character is questioned immediately. But if a cat doesn't like someone, the cat's just a butthole. Have had dogs and cats, love them both, so not looking to start a cats versus dogs argument. The thing that bothers me about the whole dogs are good judges of character bit is that I've seen movie footage of the Führer of the Third Reich petting dogs and the dogs liked him just fine. I think dogs have an entirely different value system than humans. A dog might like you or hate you because of something it smells that humans can't detect. I've had some dogs charge at me in attack mode and others walk up to me and beg to be petted. They don't sense innate goodness or badness in people. They just have their own likes and dislikes that have nothing to do with human values. To add to this, I also believe a large bit of a dog's behavior is what it picks up from its owner. For example, the only person my dog has ever been unfriendly to was someone who I had a strong disdain for. Yeah, I'm shifty as heck and dogs love me. Managers berating you for doing a bad job when they have absolutely no idea how to do your job. Should have clarified that I meant more when a manager who has no idea how to do your job picks apart the work you've done, looking for flaws, criticizing your process, when there's otherwise nothing wrong with it. When you burn a body in a crematorium, you're doing a good job. But if you burn a body at your house, you're destroying evidence. Same thing as when Miley Cyrus is in the nude and licking a hammer. It's art. But when I do it, I'm drunk and need to leave the hardware store. If the government owes you money, it can send you your refund any gosh darn time it wants to. If you owe the government money, you can bet there will be interest and penalties added.
Actually, if the IRS holds on to your money too long, they will pay you interest. And then the IRS will charge you tax on that interest.
Work smart, not hard, only applies to people who aren't usually smart. People with a good record are assumed or expected to do a better job than their peers with the not-so-great levels of achievement. This would be okay, except for the fact that the person with a good record could be punished for producing the same quality of work as the other person, simply because they're capable of more. I'm all for personal growth and doing your best, but sometimes the job simply doesn't require the extra effort. It's ridiculous to ask me to go above and beyond when I could save my energy for something that actually takes more work and deserves more time. It's okay for old people to be bigoted and close-minded because they grew up in a different time, whereas young people are just considered ignorant a-holes. Which is why I refuse to acknowledge he's just set in his ways as an excuse. No, he's just stubborn and refusing to change. Now, if they have a legitimate memory problem like Alzheimer's or dementia and aren't in their right mind, that's different. They actually cannot help that. As there often are in these chat rooms, there was a recurring theme in this one, that one being generational differences and entitlement. I have filtered it down to a much smaller representation for the sake of variety. Having kids versus not having kids. A good friend and co-student and I are in very similar situations. We both started studying medicine after 8 years of working in the same hospital. He's married, I live with my girlfriend, we both have to take the train for about an hour, 45 minutes for me, 1 hour for him, to get to our university. We both had a lot of problems in our first year, especially with chemistry and biology. I recently asked to have one subject shoved into a later year, so I have more time to study anatomy and other important subjects and refresh my knowledge of chemistry to then be ready for biochemistry, a subject most med students struggle with. I was able to change my entire curriculum the way I wanted, granted, having to study 1 or 2 semesters longer, because I have a 3-year-old kid. They told him that his situation is not severe enough to grant him to study longer than usual, even though it could easily mean he won't be able to fulfill his dream. Charities for kids get funding. Clean water for kids, clothes for kids, food for kids, AirPods for kids, but try to get funding for adults. Kids are seen as innocent, but adults just need to stop being lazy and get a job. Adults sometimes get stuck in impossible situations through no fault of their own. Having a job isn't a guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen to you. We'd have less kids in need if we helped the adults in their families and communities. The other one is substance addicts. Everyone says they should get clean, and they should, but people treat addicts in recovery as bad or worse. No one wants treatment clinics in their neighborhood. It's hard to get a job already, and if you have to go to the clinic every day, people find out that you are in recovery, getting off substances, and they don't want to talk to you. I work with people in recovery, and there's so many hoops to jump through just to get and keep treatment services. I think anyone who wants to get clean deserves support and respect. It's a very tough road. It's fine to say you're trying for a baby, but it's not okay to tell people you cream pie your wife on a daily basis. In my freshman ELA class, our teacher put my best friend and me next to each other. This was a teacher who was very monotone, was never interesting to go to her class. I was trying to be a good student, but one day she yelled at me for a reason so stupid I can't recall. This teacher also really liked my friend. So we decided to see how double-standard she was. She had a strict policy of not putting your head down in class, which is damn near impossible to do. She would randomly tell us to read from our library books when she didn't feel like teaching. With this knowledge, me and my friends decided to put her to the test. Recall, we are right next to each other. We both, in the exact same way, put our heads down on our arms. She walked around the opposite side of the classroom, thinking we wouldn't see. She finally showed up behind us. That's when she tapped on my desk, stood in awkward eye contact and silence, and said, "Keep your head up and read," very sternly. After this, she walked away. Within a second or two, my friend and I just died of laughter as she turned around and yelled at us for talking during reading time. This isn't the only time we have done this. Streaking. At what age is it no longer okay to be bare naked or only wearing underwear in public? 1-year-old? 2? Or 3? 17? 85? Not to mention bare naked baby photos. I think the general rule is, if you need someone else's help to wipe your butt, you get a pass. Being old enough to have a job and pay tax, but not being old enough to vote and have a say in where your tax dollars go. What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? I once had a mum ask if I could open up the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside, since he wanted to be a firefighter. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mum will buy it." And the mum says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance, since she didn't even try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call, and this B-word suggests that she could pay double our hourly wage if we stay for a few more minutes so her little crap bag could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the flip on out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbefrickin-leavable. Oh, that's a winner right there. Ignore your call. It's probably just a poor person anyway. This is what makes me want to punch strangers. Just slap the heck out of that woman about 9 times, and then tell the kid this could happen to anyone. Just shock them into reality. But mostly I'm just a mom that would be so frickin' proud of my kid growing up to work in an ambulance, helping others, and making a real difference. And then there's this witch making light of it like the boxy car with the loud siren and flashy lights is a disposable toy for her kid. My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first-class seats, and only business class was available. He ended up just taking a connecting flight that did have first class available, while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a while to get used to my girlfriend's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working-class family with both my parents working full-time just for us to stay afloat. Went round to my girlfriend's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Surname," trying to be really polite and introduce myself to her family. That was actually their maid. Awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, because turns out her parents were basically homeless and living out of storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business that actually became successful enough to support them, and then just kept growing. Figures. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when, and if, they do get rich. I don't think it's too off the mark to say that most of the potential problems come from generations of wealth and complacence, even just one or two. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try and get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flash new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found ways to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in early years of secondary school turned on him in later years because he was such a butthole. Man, clearly I'm not over it. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City, where a lot of new wave millionaires' kids live. The school was ridiculous. A third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids. A third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butts off to send them to a private school, and the other third were these millionaire kids. They wouldn't ever hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc., and if their Rolls-Royce didn't come on time to pick them up after school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to, "Come pick me up right now." There'd be such pricks 24/7 to the non-rich locals, classist butt kids, and constantly just bringing up the most trivial things and complaining about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this. My maid brought me the wrong LV bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get it. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc., and even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their residence hall food was, so they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. Group of rich school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught. In the judge's chambers with the farmer who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the heck they were thinking when they did it. The response, "Well, you can't put a price on a good time." Turns out that was the wrong answer. That farmer should have wanted compensation for all his trouble. My God. Especially if the combines were in the field, like, dude is literally in the middle of harvesting. Can't tell you how many Thanksgiving vacations I helped my grandparents with stuff because everyone was still combining and drying corn until the middle of the night. He was 25 years old when I knew him. His father owned oil fields. He had a credit card that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance on every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it, just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he offered his college professor money to give him a passing grade. One day, he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" When your children talk like Disney villains or members of the Borgia family, it's time to just throw them out and start from scratch. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where we passed a beach ball around, and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who was proclaimed being rich numerous times before talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives an expensive sports car caught the ball, and his question was, "If you won $1 million, what would you do with it?" His response was somewhere along the lines of, "$1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life." Thanks a lot, Brad. You ruined the game. Wow, what a frickin' power move, though. A very distant relative of ours, i.e. some weird branch of the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, "What?" So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out the place for mega dollars. My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with an only child. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money that this kid could retire on it. If you ask him, he's self-made though. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made about $20,000 to $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. She wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his homework and projects to India. He whined and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after he, Dad, donated $10,000 to the school. Overall, nice guy, but doesn't really have a clue. Outsources his homework and projects to India? He's just practicing for when he goes into the corporate world. I'm trying to figure out how he passes in-class tests. Maybe the $10K donation went to the overworked and underpaid PhD student grading the exams. A kid who would dramatically throw down his smartphone on the ground in mock frustration. Broken phones were replaced with few to no questions. For the record, his name ended with the third. I went to middle/elementary school, but with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not really realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of my classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at that same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill, with the long landscaped entrance drive, marble-floored entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc., and he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relative in-home movie theaters. Like not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with rows of seats that could seat about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized we weren't rich either. I deliver pizza in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls-Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizza isn't hard. Apparently, this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizza part-time.
That's actually super common with wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get paid $100,000 a year in allowance, plus the $15,000 a month mortgage paid for. I should point out, this is a New York City financial district apartment. $15,000 a month is for a good-sized 2-bedroom condo. Normally when I spit my drink all over the screen when writing these scripts, it's because I'm laughing. This time, it was out of sheer incredulity. Brought my college roommate to my mum's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I only lived 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of the house and he was astonished by how clean it all was. My mum's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. Then he said to my mum, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mum laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too darn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe, small college town with free campus buses, and she had taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she just had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you'd think after the first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw our address into Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about people not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, but eventually it clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day, we were having a conversation where she revealed she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180,000 house, and she thought I was dumb or lying. Shattered her world when I showed her my home on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff costs all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of $1 finally. Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job.
She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena too. She talked all the time about how poor she was and about how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the same time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy, making $11 an hour, so I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Mother fricker, I'd chop off a limb to be making $80K a year. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year. And they weren't like 1990s Toyotas and Hondas most high schoolers buy, themselves. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000 car. Sounds like his dad needs to buy him a driving tutor. Buying people is usually frowned upon. I work with a guy like the people in these stories. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5,000 ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year. They're married a month later. The girl always looks miserable and the guy is always skirting responsibilities at work. I'd say I only give it a few more weeks, but she might try to milk him for his daddy's money for a little longer. One of the kids in my grade brought bags of cocaine to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, but the police did too. Now I believe he's in an engineering program at Yale. Good luck with that, money won't save you from thermals and fluids. A kid that used to work for me came into work super teed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, but my dad still won't fire her." This was all my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a frickin' sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come by and clean up and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she is straight out of the movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around, snapping pics of her posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her to get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6, for her table, and again had the photographer take an incredible number of photos of her posing with her bottles of Martell and Jameson. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower-class citizens. She asked my mate and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again have the photographers take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from our group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at the table and it looked like we had made some friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We left them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indo and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know your place. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time, we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25K just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. I like to imagine that this guy went bankrupt trying to buy every new Steam release. Considering that some of the simulator games I've seen have more than tens of thousands of euros worth of DLC, looking at you train and flight simulators, that would be kind of amazing. I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady come every other day. None of the kids made their own bed, had to make their own food, or wash their own dishes. Heck, never even loaded a dish into the dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. Have never done their own laundry. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenaged boy have a gosh darn meltdown sobbing and cursing about their maid not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. The 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. Bonus story, when I was in college, I roomed with a girl who lived like this. Her mum did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mum would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used condom wrappers, etc. Her mum would get really snarky with me, like self-reliance was a loser quality, also because it made her daughter look bad. While it's really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate,
I'm going to get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be domestic like you. Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mum couldn't be bothered to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to the present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mum? I played football in a local kids league. One kid from another team was basically untouchable as his dad was a major sponsor of the league and would donate money for uniforms, drinks, etc. His son was a pretty good receiver but didn't like getting hit, and his parents made a big deal of leaving their son alone so he can develop his skills. He was insufferable. Anytime he scored a TD, he would do over-the-top celebrations and mock all the other players, his teammates included. Then came high school. Most of the kids in the league ended up in one of two schools. He went to mine. During tryouts, he did well. The coaches were mostly focused on skills and minimal contact during the first round of cuts. The final round was when things got interesting. Full contact was permitted, and he got rocked over and over again. No one was actually trying to tackle any harder than normal, it's just this dude didn't know what to do when he got tackled. So he screamed and cried a lot. He didn't make the team, until his dad came down to the school and offered to donate money for uniforms and some other goodies for our sports teams. So he made the team, and again we were told to take it easy on him a bit. So he did, but the other teams didn't, and he went up against some of the players he mocked previously, and they remembered. Our quarterback kept passing to him, and he was getting repeatedly smashed, over and over again. It was the only time our team cheered for the other team. He quit playing football after that. I can't help but feel bad for Football McChad III. Having your own team root against you and not understanding why everything your dad bought the team didn't help. I wonder if he became more isolated after that. Had a friend in high school whose dad was uninvolved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mum and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position he wasn't qualified for and paid way too much. He'd get drunk while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and, quickly, we had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, and video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was a multi-millionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends and life. It's too bad. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. That's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. A friend of my brother is also very well off. His parents offered him a $175,000 a year job in their family business to basically do nothing. He already lived rent-free in a waterfront apartment, car, credit card, etc. He spent his days doing drugs and partying. He's clean and sober now, but yes, it took years and years of rehab. And even now they offer him too much. He got married and they wanted to make it crazy ostentatious. It was already pretty glam, and he knows to reject it. Parents, at what point did you realize you raised a monster? Hello, this is the story of my son Felix. I am from Sweden, so I am sorry if my English is bad. Felix is 6 years old and Julia is 4 years old in this story. I can start with an incident that made me wonder how I raised my son. So me, Felix, and his younger sister, Julia, were on a camping trip through the north of Sweden when my son, from nowhere, just starts to scream, "I will kill you, Julia!" And after he starts to pray to God. No one in my family is religious, and that is what makes me uncomfortable. I ask him, "Felix, what's going on?" And he answers, "Julia wouldn't let me play with her hair." The whole trip I would always check out what Felix was doing because I could just feel his anger of something. I couldn't put my finger on what until 5 years later, 2017, when the same thing happened again. Me and my wife had just picked up the kids from school and let them play upstairs while we're cooking food, and then from nowhere we hear the loudest scream saying, "I will kill you, Julia!" So I ran upstairs as fast as I could,
When I came up to my room the kids were playing in, I saw my daughter laying on the floor bleeding from her hair, and beside her, my son is sitting praying to God with blood on his hands. We're so confused, my son had pulled so hard in his sibling's hair that she had lost hair and started bleeding. That is the most creepy thing I've seen in my life so far. When I ask my son what he has done, he answers me with the most chilling voice I will ever hear. "Yulia wouldn't let me play with her hair, Dad." About 2 weeks after the incident, I asked Felix why he pulled her hair. He said, "The man in my head tells me what to do. I can't choose what to do." My son is getting help and my daughter is fine. I had to buy security cameras because he was stealing, throwing parties, doing illicit substances in my home, etc. He looked right in the camera and flipped me off while I was at work. My heart fell. I'll ask my 18-month-old if she poo-pooed and she'll smile and say, "Yeah." Then when I put her on the changing table and take off her diaper, no poop. This makes me laugh because the kid isn't a monster, but they've found a surefire way to get attention anytime they want it. And you can be sure they're going to use it. Not my kid, but my partner's adult sister is a real handful. A panoply of vaguely diagnosed mental illnesses, including bipolar and psychosis. She's on income assistance, which helps. But she goes from morbidly depressed in the winter to wildly high in the summer. We let her move in to get herself out of debt, which she did, but now she's back in another hole. She picks bad boyfriends, the last of which we had to get a restraining order against after he threatened our children when we extricated her from his abusive grasp. The worst part is that the cycle is never ending. It's been this roller coaster for 20 years, and we're really, really tired. She's 14 for life, and not the good kind of 14-year-old. Big sister here. My brothers were fighting yesterday in the room beside mine. I'm hearing everything for 20 minutes straight. I'm having a cold and therefore wanted to see if they could resolve it first. The older brother is constantly using his strength, he's strong, fat, and tall, to taunt the younger one, but the older one is a wimp who will sit down if you demand respect. The younger one is even more of a derogative word for a female reproductive organ. I don't really condone using this word, but seriously, that is what he is. This younger is the middle child. They still don't break it up after 20 minutes. I go in there, throw the older one out of the room. He gets out, not before he hits him again. I had surgery on my leg a while ago and still in recovery, so really in no shape to get between them unless I want my other leg to break. The older gets out of the room, then suddenly the middle one gets the courage to beat him up when he's out of the room. I do not touch him but block his exit with both hands to the side of the door. This little psychopath uses all his strength to push on my hands, and I almost fall to the floor. He knows all the pain I've been in from my surgery. I get mad and tell him to stop acting like this, and if he really had the courage and wanted to beat the older one up, he should have done it in the 20 minutes before and maybe earlier. He starts taking his anger out on me, and I've had enough. My headache is so bad at this moment, I close the door and lock with a key by force. He gets out the window and gets in the house via the balcony. Now this is where his horrible and outright scary personality comes to show. Keep in mind he's only 13. I tell him, what is he doing? What does he want? He talks to me condescendingly and tells me just to go back to my room. I'm always in my room. And just tells me to shut up. He starts threatening and speaking to me as if he has any power over me. But the scary thing is how calm and poisonous his tone is. He isn't affected by any of the words I'm saying, and has zero respect to me as a big sister. I'm not demanding any respect, but he doesn't have that love and care we other siblings have for each other. I've always started to notice how he says whatever the heck he wanted, and then makes it into a joke with a cheeky smile. When my dad was going to visit grandma, he told the rest of the family, "He's just waiting on grandparents to die, then he'll be back." I mean, who the frick says that? This was a bit much, but the road my brother is headed on is not a good one, and I'm truly scared for his future. I tried to be a good mother, really, I did. But looking back, the deck was pretty stacked against us from the start. Me and my son grew up poor, and I mean really poor, in the back end of nowhere, and I had to work all the time. I was basically a slave. I certainly got treated like one. For childcare, like I could afford that, I used to leave my boy with the owner of the local store. A fat Jewish guy I got to know, and he did his best looking after him in exchange for the little guy helping out. I suppose it was child labor, but what can you do? One day, I got lucky when some rich out-of-towners suffered a breakdown on the edge of town and came into the store looking for help. They were really impressed by my son's resourcefulness and know-how, and they were obviously upset at his potential being squandered. So they offered to fund his education. The only catch was that it would have to be at a boarding school because there was no schools nearby worth a damn. I knew I would miss him like hell, but this was his big chance and I jumped at it. But when he came back, gosh, how he had changed. The next time I saw him, I'd been kidnapped by sand people, and my sweet boy, who wouldn't hurt a fly when he was young, killed every single one with this lightsaber some idiot had given him. Men, women, and the children too, and he slaughtered them like animals. Shaking my damn head. I won't lie, when I got to the punchline here, I was equal parts livid and exasperated. Well done. Well, I had to read it, and now you have to listen, subscribers. Have fun. Love, the narrator. When my youngest moved out, I had always had difficulty with her, but once she was gone, I realized how much of a bully she is. Recently, she got angry when my partner told her to not guilt-trip me, and flipped out and called him scum of the earth, telling me I am a bad mum for being with him when he is so awful to her, saying really horrible things about his children. The thing is that my sweetie is incredible, and everyone loves him, except her because he called her out on her bullcrap and stood up for me. I can't even tell you how many times I've cried because of things she's said or done. My oldest daughter is a sweetheart and they are polar opposites. I'm concerned there are some mental health issues right now because she has increased her behaviors. Unfortunately, she's off on her own, so I can't do anything but ask her to talk to someone. When she looked me dead in the eyes and poured out her cup of orange juice on the ground. It's age-appropriate boundary exploration, but still monstrous. My son asked me how long he was obligated to interact with me. Well, if you're forcing him to spend time with you, that's a valid question. True. Hated it when my mum would force me to do something I don't like. This seems like a common parenting mistake. Parents start feeling their child is too distant, so they make the whole problem worse by insisting that their child stop doing everything they enjoy and instead do something they hate with their parents. Camping trips, card games, etc. In reality, all this does is reinforce to the child that the parent doesn't care about them. If parents really wanted to grow their relationships with their kids, they've got three options. Learn about their hobbies, and see if they're receptive to talking about it and/or doing their hobbies with you. If your kid plays a video game, try playing that video game, etc. Show your kids your own hobbies to see if they're interested. Maybe you play guitar or something, and that piques their interest. If not, don't force it on them. Learn to be okay with having a healthy distance between parent and child. If you squeeze too tightly, they'll want to rebel. Make it clear that you respect them and their boundaries, and then you'll have a much stronger foundation to build on once they're out of their rebellious teenage years. My son steals my wife's eyeglasses while she is reading on her phone. She can see up close fine, but anything past 3 feet is a complete blur. He knows this and knows he can get away with taking things off counters and drawing on things if she can't see him. He's 3. When my son's Tamagotchi died and I was sad because I realized I was the one taking care of it while he was at school and in bed. He abandoned his own Tamagotchi? F him. That's how you raise a quitter. This kid better be taking care of that Tamagotchi whether he wants to or not. Oh my god, he obviously needs to be sent to military school. We may have veered off topic slightly here, I'm just loving how hot and bothered the community was getting over proper Tamagotchi treatment. My sister is raising 2 monsters, my niece and nephew. The whole family knows, even their parents know, but neither of them wants to be a parent and discipline or give consequences for their monsters' actions. My nephew at 7 yelled at my sister at Subway when she asked him to pick out his chips. He screamed, "Shut up, you B-word! I want to frickin' choke you!" He then proceeded to kick the customer nearest to him in the back of the leg. My sister just laughed it off with a defeated, embarrassed look on her face. At my daughter's 3rd birthday party, my niece, 8 at the time, realized she was wearing the jeans she doesn't like, screamed over the birthday song at her parents, and told them to fix it immediately. Well, they couldn't, they had no change of clothes. She flipped out, grabbed the birthday cake, and threw it on the ground, then ripped her pants off, threw a present on the ground, and stomped all over it. No apology, no consequences. My sister offered to pay to replace the gift. I told her I'd rather she pay to send her kids to therapy. She called me a C-word and said I didn't love my niece and nephew. They're in their teens now and still throw fits if you don't do what they want or let them win, etc. When my brother had his son, Monster Nephew started beating him up around 3. Monster was 9. Monster gave the little boy a black eye. This was the only time he ever got his butt kicked, and after that it stopped. And the only people my monster niece and nephew are genuinely scared of and behave around are my African-American sister-in-law and my Mexican brother-in-law. They've never done anything to them, they're just not white. Anyway, we have secret family get-togethers without inviting them because they always ruin them. We honestly don't like living like this, but we also don't like spending X amount of hours listening to them whine, complain, and scream, and demand things while breaking and destroying our property. And you can't say anything to them and their parents won't say anything. It's upsetting. I dread their future. Not a parent, but a sibling. My sister has become a vain, selfish, unloving sociopath. She treats my mum as a slave, and my mum loves her too much to notice. My mum was talking to her, she got bored and said, quote, "You can leave now." My mum replied with something like, "You can't talk to me like that, you need to respect me," to which my sister replies, "I have no respect for the B word that cleans my knickers. Leave." I'm in shock. If I said that to my mum, I'd be slapped, but she turns a blind eye to my sister. Not my son, but there was a kid in the playground that my kid was playing with. He was about 5 or 6. If he didn't get his own way, he started screaming and hitting other kids at the playground. I advised my son not to play with him or talk to him since he was being a little crapbag. I didn't say that to my kid. The kid's mum was in the playground but ignoring her son and loudly playing Pokemon Go. That kid is likely going to turn into a monster seemingly since he is ignored. My daughter wrote "F you" and "Mama dies" with her figure scratched on a piece of paper the other day when we wouldn't let her make lemonade. She's 8. She's gone on rages and destroyed her room before, including throwing furniture around. Not looking forward to her as a teenager.
She's in therapy, right?
Yes, under medication too. She's much less ragey than she used to be, but catch her when she's tired or in transition and it's still hit or miss. I feel bad for her, and you. I mean, we blame people with mental issues for being jerks, but that's like blaming a sick person for being sick. They need help, and we should give it to them. Good job being a trooper. I dated someone who was a terror as a child and even as a young adult in my earlier life. She is a very sweet and well-adjusted human being now. One of my best friends with a child of her own. There is hope. I do hope the kid gives her a run for her money. It's only fair. I was in court as a plaintiff waiting for my case. They did all the criminal stuff first. One of the cases was this high school senior who had beat the crap out of his 100-pound, 5-foot mum. She was crying as she was refusing to have him home on bail. She was scared of this kid. This was an upper-middle-class family, and the kid looked like he was on his way to a good college. She kept saying he did it every time he didn't get what he wanted. Judge sent him to Monmouth County Jail, not a nice place for an 18-year-old skinny neebish. Just imagine what's going to happen to him when his fellow inmates find out what he's in for. Oofed. This thread has been a real inflictor of whiplash between the funnier ones and the ones like this. Okay, I need a laugh break, so here's a funnier story. Not the parent, but a brother. When he went to the bathroom and practically fumigated the entire house. The only room that was safe was the basement bathroom, with the door shut and the fan on. He was laughing his butt off for over an hour. Ex-teacher here. My own kids are far from monsters, but I've met some. When I taught preschool, there was a kid who was banned from YMCA camps for his behavior, and they never banned someone before. He brought a plastic, thankfully, knife to school and threatened to cut all of us teachers. Told other kids he would burn their homes down after first setting fire to all their toys. He heard me calming another student who was afraid of bees and mentioning I'm allergic, but I've never been stung because I don't scare bees. He came up, told me he was going to put a wasp nest in my car, lock me in it, and watch me die. He was one of only 2 students expelled from that school in the 15+ years I've been associated with it. His mother still didn't realize her son was a monster. She said she ate lead paint when pregnant with him, but claimed he was just fine. Often parents just cannot or refuse to see their children for what they are. Not a parent, and I won't ever have kids for obvious reasons, but I was the monster. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I can't change the past. I lived with an abusive father who often beat my mother, my sister, and me. He was abusive, physically, beating us, and mentally. My mother said it started when I was 4 months old. My mother always tried to protect us, but wasn't always there. I lived in a home filled with hate and violence and never really learned what love or happiness was. I was a pretty violent child with a lot of anger issues. My mother told me I would often hit my grandmother or her, and when my sister was born, it was even worse. I hated her and wanted her dead because since she was there, I couldn't have nice things anymore. I was 3. I was the kind of child to throw a tantrum because I was not given the present I wanted for Christmas. When I had rooms full of toys and I would throw myself on the floor and scream or even hit people and break items, then act as if everything was normal. It took a turn when my best friend passed away. I was 6 and started being fascinated by death. I pushed my sister in the stairs and tried to kill her a few times. Now, I could have been helped if my mum had accepted that I had a problem, but she refused to think something might not be wrong. With the death of my friend, I was forced by school to see a psychiatrist who realized something was wrong and asked to see me again. I never returned as my mother just didn't want to face the truth. Growing up, I had a lot of anger issues and sent a few of my classmates to the hospital, but when questioned, I didn't remember what happened. It was around 16 my mother realized something was really wrong. I had an argument with her and hit her, then came back a few minutes later and wondered why she was mad. A few days later, my father had cornered me while I was doing the washing up. I grabbed a knife, and if my sister didn't see it and reacted, I know I would have stabbed him, even if I don't remember it. I remember my father screaming at me, but not the knife part. When I realized something was wrong, I asked to see a psychiatrist who told me I had an illness. Now I've changed a lot and seem like a normal person. I'm 23, really close to my sister, and I don't have anger issues anymore. I don't see my father anymore, and things seem to be good, except I don't really have feelings. I never did, but I still know what I did was bad. To all the parents out here, if your child acts in a way that is not normal, bring them to a psychiatrist. It's not something to be ashamed of, but someone that is ill won't change by himself. I'm not a parent and likely won't be due to medical conditions, but I fear my younger brother will likely turn into a monster. He's a self-entitled, uncaring, sociopathic, and frankly violent little prick. He gets away with not doing his homework, playing video games constantly, and refuses to help my dad and I out with stuff. He doesn't do chores and is a lazy butthole. My dad, Lord save him, and I are at our wits' end. A little over a year ago, he threatened to slit my throat in a violent, anger-fueled rage, after hitting me over and over again, punching me in the stomach, and hitting me with a wooden dowel. After I told him to get off his game and do his homework, or I would turn off the internet until he did his homework. He's told me before, on many occasions, that he wished I was never born, that I should have died instead of Mum, who died 2 months prior to this, and that he hates my guts and wants me to die. He told me that if I told our dad, he would kill me and my cat in my sleep. When he was younger, he trapped my oldest cat, who's now since passed on due to old age, underneath the porch and didn't let us know until we found her 3 days later, alive, hungry, and dehydrated. He's thrown my youngest cat in the mud because he was bored and she was annoying him. He threw a book at our elderly dog because the dog was whining and being annoying. He has no care in the world but for himself and his 1.5-year-old cat. He's a monster through and through, and I dread the day my dad finally comes to his senses and sees what kind of monster we've had living in our house. Despite the grimness of this last post, posts like the next one give me hope that perhaps cases like this can be fixed. Not a parent, but the monster, I guess. Well, I got my crap together since college, but that was a crazy crap show before that. When I was really little, I used to not respect anyone, and I didn't understand any boundaries. For example, I destroyed everything that annoyed me and tortured little baby kittens to see how they react. Drowning, for example. My parents tried to teach me how to be responsible with living things, but it took 3 dead cats until I understood how to handle living things without murdering them. I really liked war and destroying stuff, painted weird stuff everywhere, peed into the plants in my room, and built weapons to destroy stuff. I also liked to hurt and terrify my classmates for fun. Went through some therapy, but it was mostly homeopathic crap and giving me those weird alcoholic drinks to calm your kid down. In secondary school, I spent a lot of time harassing the weird kid in our class that had no friends with a group of weird screw-ups. We were perverted as hell as well, and did a lot of dumb stuff in general. I started getting into video games in that time, and I thank God for it saved my insane butt, because in college I made friends through playing all day, and they helped me to understand how normal people behave. Now I got my act together, have tons of friends and a good job, and soon a pretty frickin' great girlfriend. But knowing what's normal and what's not is still a huge problem, especially in areas people don't talk much about, which always gets me in bad situations. I really don't know what my parents think of me, to be honest. They generally talk little and never told me I am proud or anything like that, which I understand, to be honest. I guess they are just happy I'm working on my crap. They could have told me earlier though. I mean, to this day, I had to work out my problems alone. They never talked directly like, hey, you've got to take care of these things. Maybe they don't want to accept the fact that I am indeed crazy. Fathers. What is the best way you have messed with a daughter's boyfriend when meeting him? I was the boyfriend. Her dad challenged me to a game of chess, and lost horribly. Afterwards, he took me to the man cave and proceeded to try to beat me at pool and video games. He lost terribly. I kind of felt bad afterwards, but at the time, it felt good. My then girlfriend could only laugh at us being competitive and trying to beat each other in games. I'm still the ex-boyfriend he would rather her date, despite her and I not talking but once every 2 years. My sister's first real boyfriend was from about 3 hours away, and she brought him to the house for the first time without telling us they were coming. My father and I had no intention of messing with him. Due to some poor planning on my sister's part, they showed up on the Saturday before the start of the hunting season. At the time, my father and I were sighting in the hunting rifles up the field around 500 yards. Completely unintentional, but if I'd been in his shoes, I would have crapped myself. I'm a daughter, and I do not have any funny father stories, but I do have one badass mum story. My house has the front door on the second floor, and our front steps are large and can be intimidating. All friends are required to come inside and introduce themselves before I could get in their car and leave with them. So I had a date with a popular boy, douchebag, and he texted me that he was there to pick me up and to come outside. I told him that he has to come and meet my parents, and he did, although awkwardly and rudely. Long story short, he was incredibly disrespectful towards me, and I was back home within 30 minutes. Later that evening, my mother messaged him on Facebook, "You are the rudest boy to ever walk up the steps to my house." Shortly after, I got a large apology text from the boy. My mother didn't tell me about the message she sent until at least 6 months later. It was awesome. Oh, well done, Mum. Dads may be able to bring the threats, but this lady weaponized some good old-fashioned shame. I have one my dad did. I had the first boyfriend come over. I was 14, for Halloween, and my dad, a butcher, was unwrapping bones for our 3 dogs as a treat. My boyfriend walked over to my dad, who was using a knife, a great big one, to cut the shrink wrap off them, and asked what those bones were from. My dad, looking boyfriend dead in the eye, pulled a sharpening steel out of the bucket on the counter and sharpened the blade on the already sharp knife in swift movements, and said, "My daughter's old boyfriend." Boyfriend went sheet white and dumped me the next day. Thanks, Dad. Not a father, but my cousin has the best story about a first and last date. In the late 70s, my uncle was living a post-divorce bachelor life and was enjoying himself immensely, dating a younger woman who from a distance or behind resembled my cousin enough that they could be mistaken for one another, and if standing near each other, you might assume they were sisters. While he was dating this woman, my cousin, all of 16 at the time, was going on her first real date dinner. A school dance, the works. My uncle was slightly apprehensive about it, but was determined to make the best of the situation and accept the fact that his little girl was growing up. A few minutes before she had to be picked up, my uncle was struck by inspiration. He and his girlfriend were also going out to dinner that night, and he noticed that his daughter and his girlfriend were wearing the identical sweaters. So he sprung into action. He made his girlfriend give her necklace to his daughter, had them swap shoes, and put paper bags over their heads. When my cousin's date walked up, he was warmly greeted by Uncle, who ushered him into the living room and said, "We're all going out tonight. You pick your date, and I'll take the other." The kid, speechless, stammered for a bit, and then pointed. My cousin went out on a very fancy dinner date with her father to a French bistro, despite being terribly mortified. She admits that the food was exceptional, and her father let her have a few glasses of wine to ease the mortification. After dinner, he dropped her off at the dance and picked up his girlfriend. Let's just say, neither woman was happy, and my cousin's paramour, so confused by the situation, decided it was time to end their relationship. I aspire to achieve such heights of mind messery. I feel like that could have been kind of funny if it ended with the choice. Like, ha ha ha, all in good fun, kid. Here, take the daughter out. Thanks for being a good sport. But to actually make him go through with taking out the other girl? The frick, man? I was the daughter. Boyfriend and I were sitting in my kitchen when Dad came home from playing volleyball. After talking a few minutes, without any warning, Dad dropped his pants. Thankfully, he had gym shorts on underneath. I told this story at Dad's funeral, and it got a lot of laughs. Was the boyfriend. Wanted to take girlfriend on a date, but she said her dad had to meet me first. He was a single dad, so it's not like her mum would have been there to hold him back or anything, and dude was pretty buff. My girlfriend goes in her room while her dad sits me down on the couch and sits across from me, not saying a word, but looking straight into my eyes the whole time. 15-year-old me was pretty shaken. He finally says, "I'm gonna make this short. Anything you do to my daughter, I'm going to do to you."
We just held hands that day. That's when you reply, "You're gonna finger my butt?" I'm Korean. I play StarCraft. He's going to have to beat me on the Hunter's map to get permission for the first date. Yes. Old school Brood War StarCraft. I fully respect this method of proving oneself to a prospective father-in-law. After all, it's potentially the scenario I'm most likely to succeed in. Boyfriend of a girl with 2 dads. I've yet to meet her real father, and she doesn't want me to. He's a huge crapbag that cheated on her mum and then fled across the country. Her stepdad I see on a somewhat regular basis. He's a character, and that's for sure. We told our parents about our relationship about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and the first thing he does is shake my hand with a grip that's way too hard for normal, and then takes me aside and asks what my intention is with his daughter. While asking this, he's gripping his hand around my neck. It should be noted, I'm a big kid. I'm 6'1" and like 200 pounds. I'm not easily intimidated. At that moment, this man scared the crap out of me. As I was trying to muster up an answer, he drops his hand and hugs me and tells me he's messing with me and that I should have seen my face. Needless to say, she doesn't like him much either. Boyfriend of a girl with 2 dads. At first I thought this meant she has same-sex parents, which meant you had to put up with twice as many dad jokes. I'm the boyfriend in this situation. Was at my girlfriend's house, her dad saw me, walked up to me and said, "Who the frick are you?" and then proceeded to follow me around, practically touching my face with his until I left. Fortunately, he was electronically tagged and couldn't follow me out of the house. Just FYI, he was tagged for sticking up for kids being beaten up by other men. So I want to give a bit more context to this. I went to my girlfriend's house to pick her up. She wasn't ready, so I went outside. While we were on our way out, he made his comment and then followed me out of the house, obviously looking me up and down while remaining uncomfortably close. This possibly lasted about 20 seconds. This wasn't an aggressive thing, he did it purely to make me feel awkward and on the spot. I think he wanted to see what type of guy I was, how I would react to that sort of confrontation, etc. According to my girlfriend, her ex-boyfriends resembled mouthy kids. Perhaps her dad was testing my level of maturity. I can't say for sure, never asked him about it. Hope this explains things a little better. When I brought my first real boyfriend home for dinner for the first time, I forgot to mention that my dad was also home for dinner. He's a policeman and comes home for meals, so we rock up and there's a police car in the driveway. It's normal for me, but my boyfriend's face was literally, "Ooh, uh-oh." My dad always calls my boyfriends what's-his-face until he gains respect for the guy. My current boyfriend just recently got his name privilege, which has happened, I think, twice. I made up a game. I call them by a different name every time I address them. Goal is to see how many times I can call them before they correct me. Record is 27 in one visit. My pawpaw greeted my aunt's boyfriend with a single gunshot out the front door, into the old gutted truck about 20 yards away from the main driveway. He still fires off a greeting shot when they come in and out from town, 17 years later. To expand, a pawpaw is a grandfather if your country is F. My pawpaw is half Japanese, half Native American former US Marine, sheriff and EMT, current Etsy scarf and shawl shop owner. I'm trying to decide if that sounds more West Virginia or Alabama. Louisiana, don't you forget it. My daughter just turned 8. I am here for notes. Opens notepad. Begin. Welcome, new dad. Well, the rule seems to be threaten or imply violence, and if you own a weapon of some kind, so much the better. Narrator and the I Am the Genius channel does not condone this method. My daughters are 2 and 4. When my oldest was born, I started working out again. I found the best inspiration on days when I'm feeling lazy is to imagine myself as some nearly mythical titan ripping the door off its hinges to greet some poor kid intent on taking my daughter on a date. So my plan is long-term, and I'll check back and let you all know how it goes. My dad has told every single one of the guys I've brought home, even if they were just friends, that he's not afraid to go back to jail. My dad has never been to jail. My dad is very good at deadpanning. Upon meeting my boyfriend, Dad told him that he was too tall. He's almost 7 foot. He wasn't sure if my dad was messing with him or was actually serious. I had to explain to him later that a good portion of what my dad says should be taken with a grain of salt. I was the boyfriend in this case, but this one has always stuck with me. Everyone knows the old "dad is cleaning his gun" cliché. Well, this is a slightly different version of that. He was polishing a sledgehammer. It turned out he was actively just screwing with me and didn't care, but I had to give him credit for creativity and for leaving me at an absolute loss when I walked into their living room and saw the gleam from the shiny hammer. Not a father, but if I have a daughter, I want to dress like a clown and say, "Well, I'm off to work."
These are the ones I like. It's funny, but at the same time you're not threatening a kid. 10 out of 10. We hosted a beautiful teenage exchange student for a year. When a boy came to take her to a dance, I looked down at him and said, in roughly these words, I am responsible for her right now, but her real father is even bigger than me, and you don't want to do anything that would tee off both of us. I went to tell my new father-in-law that I was serious with his daughter and intended to marry her. He interpreted it as me asking for his permission and told me, now isn't the right time. Maybe in a few years. That really messed me up. Good guy, language barrier. It all worked out in the end. Daughter here. First time I bring my boyfriend to my hometown, we visit my parents. My mum tries to stuff him with food while my dad excitedly describes the great deal he got on my sister's new car. My boyfriend comes to join me in the middle of this and my dad stops, looks him dead in the eye and excitedly says, "Want to see something cool?" We are greeted with a picture of my dad when he was 21, buff, shirtless, and flexing. I begin to cover my face in embarrassment as my dad looks excitedly at my boyfriend for a response. My boyfriend simply says, you look good, man. Pretty sure my dad did this to embarrass me instead of mess with my boyfriend, but did put him in a pickle for a second there. My boyfriend now makes jokes about how hot my dad is, just to embarrass me more. I call this the worst first date experience thanks to my dad. I moved to a new school in the 3rd grade and fell in elementary love with a boy wearing those pants that unzip to reveal shorter pants, or shorts. It was not until the 5th grade, after endless diary entries and tampered with MASH outcomes, that my crush finally asked me out on a date. My dad immediately said no and I sobbed. I sobbed and sobbed until my mother talked my dad into letting me go. The only problem was, he was coming too. I decided not to tell my crush that my father would be attending the date with us, but instead pretended to be just as confused as he was that an older man was sitting directly behind us during the movie. The movie was Just Married. My poor crush tried to put his arm around me, and I felt my face flush as a voice from behind us said, "You want to keep that arm?" My father laughs to this day about how far we were leaning away from each other after that, and is very pleased with himself that he ended my affectionate advances. What my dad doesn't know is that we kissed every recess after that date until our terribly dramatic breakup on the soccer field. One thing I will say seriously for a second here is that if you try and forbid your kid from interacting with the opposite gender, they will generally find a way. These kids are thankfully a little young to get into real trouble, but I genuinely feel like rebellious teens will go further than they might have gone otherwise just to get back at their overbearing parents. Boyfriend, now husband. I came over to meet her extended family for Thanksgiving, sat down next to her uncle. He looks over at me and says, "I'm gay, you know," and stares at me. I replied with, "Me too," and moved closer to him, practically sat on his lap. I like this guy. Been married to her for 2 years and been together for 8 years now. Her family is hilarious. My wife's aunt is very outgoing, playful, and loves to party and drink, and mess with the boyfriends. The first time I met her, she was already drunk and got very handsy with me. She'd put her arm around my shoulder and pull me in tight, kiss my cheek, push my face towards her cleavage, etc. She was trying to make me squirm. She says, "I got a hot tub out back. Why don't you and I go for a dip?" And I, uncharacteristically, shot back with, "Well, I didn't bring my swimsuit. Would you mind if we just hop in naked, just the two of us?" She busted up laughing and ever since always jokingly refers to me as her boyfriend and tells my wife to back off of me, that I'm hers, etc. I was told I passed the test that evening. It was like being jumped into a gang, but instead I was molested by the drunk and crazy aunt of the family. They're a fun family as well. I was the boyfriend. My girlfriend warned me that her dad liked to be sitting in his chair, cleaning his shotgun, whenever one of the girls brought a boy to meet the parents. She told me that the gun was a relic and had been disabled or deactivated or some damn thing. Don't remember the exact term. She said he was real proud of it and said it was a Springfield something or other. So I walked in and there he was. I said, "Hey, nice Springfield something or other," and asked if I could hold it. He handed it to me and I looked at it and said, "When did you have it deactivated?" The girls, who were all watching, smiled. He wasn't amused, especially after he started a discussion about guns and it was clear I didn't know anything about them. He eventually figured out that she warned me and he was none too pleased at how bold I was. I just thought it was funny. That was the start of a long and rocky relationship with that man. Much to his dismay, I married his daughter. Now that I'm the dad, I grill the boyfriends about what my daughter has told them about me and her mother. My being a forensic investigator is not something my daughters usually lead with, I have found. and my comments about knowing how to make it look accidental are usually met with some level of clenching. Brother to the sister that brought him home. My old man wrote his name on a 12-gauge shell and set it on the mantel above the fireplace and said nothing. It was about halfway through dinner before he noticed it. I've never seen a face get so white so quick in all my life. They're married now. Shell is still sitting there. Was the boyfriend. Walked into the cleaning the guns gag. He asked, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" And without missing a beat, because sometimes I lack a filter, I replied, "Depends. What do you think I can get away with?" Her mother laughed so hard she dropped a glass and broke it. Mine was, "That depends how she feels about rubber chickens and tapioca." This wasn't my dad, but my brother. I brought my boyfriend home for a week over the summer. We're in college and live in separate states, we're not at school. And I was very excited for him to meet my family. I had already met his, and they were pretty cool. My parents were very nice and normal to him, but when we sat down for dinner that night, my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, came downstairs, chatted normally for a bit, then said, "Wait here." He runs up to his room and comes back down about 5 minutes later with a stack of papers and a pen and sets it down in front of my boyfriend. "It's a quiz." It was a quiz. A literal quiz that he had typed out. He made him put his name and the date and everything. The questions were divided into 3 categories: sports, music, and movies. They were all things my brother considered vital for my boyfriend to know if he ever wanted to truly belong to the family. My boyfriend, being the cool guy that he is, took it all in stride and only got about 2 wrong on the whole 30 questions quiz, with no preparation or studying at all. My family was suitably impressed, and he's around a year and a half later. The following story just had too many little anecdotes about the father in question, so bear with me. Am the daughter. Dad and his best friends dressed up in Speedos, mowed the lawn, barbecued, held hands, sang horribly off-key together, and nicknamed the poor soul McBigMac. He stopped hanging out with me after that. Dad and his best friends still do weird stuff together like this, and they are my favorite people. Oh, Dad and his best friends are hilariously straight, but hey, you can't really be considered best friends if people don't think you're a little gay, right? I'm intrigued as to how you can be hilariously straight. You sleep with clowns of the opposite sex. What the F? Oh, where can I get a dad that funny? Well, he likes to show up at the mall in grass skirts, coconut bras, and a siren light on his head, but only when you have boys around. I'm willing to sell mine. The first post I thought, boy, he's silly. Now I'm thinking maybe he's not all there. The first time I met my ex's dad, he had just had surgery. I think I was 15 at the time, and while I was waiting for her, he asked me if I would go into the study and put on some music and make him a drink. I got him a single Jameson with 1 ice cube, because that's what my Irish family members drank, and I knew he was Hibernian, and put on a Fleetwood Mac record because he had an awesome player set up. That was him testing me, apparently. He told me later that I passed because I didn't just plug in my phone into their auxiliary cord and grab him a beer. I hung out with him once, way later after his daughter and I had broken up, and he ordered me a Jameson with a single ice cube on his way out of the bar. I was the boyfriend. I wanted to take my girlfriend out to see a movie, but she said that I had to meet her dad first. Her dad runs the local farmer's market, so I had to stop by that morning. Luckily, it was winding down because after an awkward hello, he put his hand on my shoulder and led me around and introduced me to everyone at all the stands. Now, for an introvert such as myself, this would have been bad enough. But no, as he was introducing me to everyone, he used random female names for me. Hi there, so-and-so, this here's Stephanie, and he's taking my daughter on her first date. Hi guys, meet Martha, he's taking my daughter out. It was kind of funny afterwards. I had a boyfriend named Nelson. My dad took great pleasure in doing Nelson's laugh from The Simpsons whenever my boyfriend came over. We didn't last long, lol. Pretty sure you mean, we didn't last long, ha ha. Beat him up in Battlefield and a few other video games. I'm almost 50 and have been a gamer since my early teens. I have more experience with games than he has. A mate was arrested for drug possession by his girlfriend's police officer father. He was going to be introduced to that family that weekend anyway. Would have loved to have been a fly on the wall that evening. Boyfriend. Hello, future father-in-law. First of all, I want to apologize for my twin brother. He is the black sheep of the family and in no way representative of my or my parents' values and culture. Military veterans. What are your best stories from boot camp? Just a foreword here, folks. Due to the military tradition of swearing like a sailor, or in this case, like a soldier, there will be by necessity a certain amount of language replacement in this video, more so than I've had to do in any other video at the time of writing. Assume that if a phrase seems slightly mild, I've been editing it to make it safe for YouTube. Thanks, narrator. I had been in boot camp for like 3 days. We were downstairs in formation at attention with our stupid safety flashlights about to march to PT. Obviously, when at attention, you're not supposed to move. Then I suddenly had an itch on my nose. Only happens when you're at attention. So I tried to sneak out a quick scratch, but for some reason my brain shut down and my dumb idiot self decided to use my flashlight. I scratched my nose and was almost home free until I had this weird thought. I wonder how bright this is. So I stick the flashlight to my eye, click on, click off, go back to attention. No sooner than my hand hit my side, I hear, "What the frick was that?" I was immediately pulled out of formation and screamed at by no less than 6 drill instructors. They screamed some of the funniest insults I have ever heard until this day. Then they lead me to every squad who was formed outside, 6 I think, and made me demonstrate my amazing and godlike talents for all 6 squads before letting me return to formation. Oh, there are so many stories to choose from. One of the funniest is who we had to salute. Every living being. Literally. So I'm walking back from a med appointment I had when a squirrel crosses my path. So I render a snappy salute and bark out a, "Good morning, sir," just as an officer is walking across the street from me. He ran across the street to investigate just who the heck I was saluting. I responded, "The squirrel, sir." He said, "What the frick? You saluted a squirrel?" "Yes, sir." "Who's your company commander?" "Petty Officer Shanks, sir." "Okay, move on, dummy, and stop saluting squirrels." "Yes, sir." One of my platoon buds was a bit of a masochist and got off hard to the sergeant yelling at him. It was sort of funny to watch this sergeant berate him for a good 5 minutes, and then he'd run off to rub one out in the washroom. One time we were all sleep deprived and Sarge was just ragging on him, telling him he's made of stronger stuff and to keep going, you weakling, before he fell over and said, "Oh, frickin' crap." Pretty sure he came in his pants and passed out. Navy in 2003. We were out on the grinder, which is our name for the asphalt area, and you can't speak unless spoken to out there. RDC is feeling playful and shouts my name. "What adult fun time position creates the ugliest babies?" Me, both thinking and not thinking at the same time because I knew the answer to the joke, "I don't know, petty officer. Why don't we ask your mother?" He turned beet red and everyone in my division let out a gasp. There was some yelling after that, but later that day he called me into his office and told me no hard feelings. So in the end, not bad. We had a kid in my boot camp platoon named Jackson. The senior drill instructor was Sergeant Jackson. Poor Recruit Jackson was known as Recruit Laundry number 38 for the whole time, because he didn't rate the name Jackson. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the fine contributors to these stories shall list the standout names of their squads. We had a private named Whore. The drill sergeant took one look at his name and said, "Too frickin' easy." Never mocked him for it. We had a Barbie. The poor guy got away without a word until one day at FTX, the drill sergeant wakes us up at 3 in the morning and the song Barbie Girl over the loudspeakers and a very specific dedication. Platoon 3117 had a recruit Dumcum, who was a ginger Canadian, and a Redick, who was black. We had a trainee named Balls. Yep, Balls. None of the TIs ever gave her crap for it, but man, if every single one of them didn't pause and try not to laugh during roll call. My surname is Quick. Same thing happened to me. Although it made marching orders like, "Platoon, by the quick march," amusing. One time I yelled out, "Just me, Corporal?" Everyone laughed. I got yelled at. Good times. Navy boot camp had a female with the last name Guzzler. They had to change her rank to fireman because all the RDCs that saw or heard the name swarmed on it. We had a guy named Pajarianon. Day 1, our chief RDC told him, "Yep, I can't pronounce that crap. Unless I say otherwise, your name is P13. Throughout boot, he acquired the names P13, PJ, Pija, and Mr. P. The first couple of weeks of boot are full of medical and dental exams, and if you need a procedure, you get it done right there. Tons of guys had their wisdom teeth pulled, and we had one guy come back right before lights out with his mouth full of gauze and loopy from the drugs. Our DI called us all to the center of the room, formed us up, and then told us to sit Indian style on the floor, and that Recruit Toothy was going to tell us a bedtime story. He pulled up a chair for Toothy and then told him to tell us the story of the Battle of the Monitor and Merrimack. Toothy mumbled that he didn't know the story, so the DI told him to just make it up, and for every fact that he got right, we'd get to sleep an extra 5 minutes in the morning. What followed was like a live episode of Drunk History, minus any factual accuracy. As best as Toothy could recall, the Monitor was British and the Merrimac was Old Ironsides, and that in the end,
they shot the crap out of each other and everyone died. The end.
We were all dying laughing, but the DI sat there stone-faced. After Toothy was done, DI just stood up and said,
"That is exactly how it happened. Well done."
Got up, turned off the lights, and walked out. Got a bladder infection in boot camp. I peed the bed and tried to hide it as long as possible. I was afraid that if I admitted to it, then I would be kicked out. I was able to hide the urine-soaked mattresses by switching them out with extras that were to the back of the Thai squad bay every morning before the drill instructors woke up. This went on for a couple of weeks before someone told on me. The drill instructor wasn't exactly sympathetic about my situation. While everyone was getting ready, he had me take my sheets to the quarterdeck and do push-ups with my face dipping into the pee on every down movement. That kind of sucked. After breakfast, I was told to meet the corpsman, and after I'd be sent to a doctor, and my separation from the Marines would be started before I even earned that title. Screw that noise, I'm going to finish this crap. So instead of going to see the doctor, I wandered around MCRD San Diego aimlessly for 3 hours, while trying to pull a look off where my face always looked like I was moving with purpose. It worked. Not one Marine stopped me to ask what I was doing. When I finally went back to my squad bay, I simply told our scribe that the doctor said to have me woke by firewatch every 3 hours. The DI that laughed as I was leaving asked me how soon I was leaving when I returned. I told him the lie and he bought it. Got lucky. My name for the duration, Recruit Peabody, not so lucky. I ended up graduating and serving 8 years honorably. Not my story, but from a friend who was a couple of weeks behind me in basic. Air Force training, San Antonio, Texas. It's week 2 or week 3 of the 6-week training course, and it's chow time. As with every other basic chow, you queue up, keep your mouth shut, follow the designated lines, get your food, and eat quickly and quietly. Do not get up from your table until the designated time. Fail to follow any of these procedures will result in a crap storm courtesy of Hurricane Angry Fricking Training Instructor. Every flight that goes through basic has that weird kid that just doesn't quite fit in for one reason or another. My flight had a southern kid who unfortunately supported every negative stereotype about the southern US there was. He was Cletus the slack-jawed yokel made flesh. My friend's flight, however, had a kid who was quiet, calculated, removed, and quite possibly a sociopath. During this particular time at chow, he was sat down with his food and ate a decent portion of it. Suddenly, he stands up and without following the designated paths, makes a beeline to the ice cream machine. Trainees are not allowed ice cream until they have TI permission, which doesn't usually happen until the final week. That did not stop this kid from getting 2 ice cream cones, 1 for each hand. He walks back to his table, passing the snake pit, where the instructors eat, along the way. He begins to go to town on these ice cream cones, alternating licks between one and the other. The instructors at the snake pit are in shock at the sheer audacity. All heads turn to his training instructor, their smirks and furrowed brows encouraging him to rush over and psychologically destroy this kid. He gets up and rushes over. "What the heck, trainee? Who in the heck said you had permission to get ice cream? I don't recall giving you permission to..." The verbal barrage continues as the TI assaults him with every harsh word he can muster. He ends his tirade with, "Who the hell do you think you are?" The trainee turns his head slowly, looks the training instructor dead in the eye, and without a smile or any other display of emotion, softly, confidently says, "I'm Batman." The TI was nonplussed. He was either so unprepared for that response, or thought it was so hilarious that he had to turn around in order to save face. He walked back to the snake pit without a word. Batman finished his ice cream. I mean, does anybody else think that the instructor had just realized that there was a potential sociopathic serial killer in the flight? Another commenter writes,
"Well, he did get permission. Oh man, I loved the snake pit after my 3rd recyclement. After a couple of months, I knew my crap. I grabbed a dessert with every meal. One time I had 7 of them on me at the same time." "Oh, you think you deserve a dessert?" "Yes, sir." "In what year did the Air Force separate from the Army?" "Sir, trainee dumbass reports as ordered. 1947, sir." Another TI, "Who is your flight chief?" "Sir, trainee dumbass reports as ordered. My flight chief is Master Sergeant so-and-so, sir." "You give a new reporting statement with every answer, trainee." "Sir, trainee dumbass reports as ordered. Only upon the initial report or when switching instructors, sir." This went on for some time. They pretty much just let me have the cake after that one. I had the pleasure of witnessing this one myself.
You've already heard about the snake pit. Well, the empty eyes on mine regularly pull out trainees and question them on stuff we're supposed to know. One day, they pull out one poor sap from our brother flight. It went roughly as follows. Trainee, what's the insignia of the full colonel? Trainee, the insignia of the colonel is a bird, sir. What type of bird exactly? Permission to adjust, sir. Adjust. The trainee then proceeds to set his tray on their table, puts his hands up in the Egyptian pose but with both hands outward, turns his head to the side and says, "Like this, sir." The onlooking TIs nearly choked on their food while the questioning TI stared at him dumbfoundedly for a few moments before yelling at him to "Get your crap off our table and get the frick out of my sight." Oh, that was probably one of the best times I've seen a TI at loss for words. After someone addressed the drill sergeant by his name, not drill sergeant name, the DS screamed at him, "Oh, do you know me? Are we friends? Do you come over to my house on the weekend, drink beer, and have adult fun times with my wife?" Still one of my favorites. My favorite story is from 2006. We were salty Marine recruits in our last week before graduating and going home. Normally, I guess they like to bring in new super-motivated drill instructors to mess with us. Well, one night in formation before we hit the wrecks, the new sergeant notices one of my friends, Private Law, was rocking back and forth. He says to Law, "Quit rocking, Law." To which Law yelled, "This recruit will never stop rocking, sir." One of the first days in basic, a guy in my platoon was standing at attention while having his room inspected by the sergeant. Because there was a large piece of fuzz/fluff on his shirt that immediately drew the sergeant's attention. Imagine a female French-Canadian sergeant with this accent, although obviously much harsher. "Recruit Bloggins, what is that on your shirt? Is that a fluffy?" "Yes, sergeant." "Why is there a fluffy on your shirt, Bloggins?" "I must have missed it, sergeant." "Missed it? But it is so huge. How did you miss such a big fluffy?" She plucks it off him. "Hold out your hand." He holds out his hand and she places it on his palm. "This is Mr. Fluffy. Find a home for him, like a pill bottle or something. From now on, whenever I want to see Mr. Fluffy, you must bring him to me." And so, for the rest of basic, every time the sergeant found a piece of fuzz, even on someone from a different platoon, she would yell out, "Mr. Fluffy!" And Bloggins would have to march over to her double time and present Mr. Fluffy, and she would formally hand him the new piece of fuzz to add to Mr. Fluffy. There was hell to pay if he didn't have Mr. Fluffy with him at all times. Every unit has its mascot. I'm just glad that in this case it was a fluffy rather than a furry. Great Lakes, 1994, Company 159. I had a bottom bunk. Guy on top bunk was a guy who barely spoke English. One day we were marching around and he was too afraid to speak up and let the company commander know he had to poop. He pooped his dungaree pants and left a trail that those marching behind him walked through. When CC realized what was up, he halted the formation, grabbed the guy and ran into the nearest building. When they reappeared, Poopy Pants had removed his t-shirt and fashioned it into a diaper to make it back to our barracks building. One night, the guy in the top bunk next to mine had a nightmare and in his sleep he jumped out of his rack. He crashed into my bunk, spraining his arm, ankle and putting a gash into his head, and had no idea what was going on. Another night, I was on fire watch, making my rounds at 3 o'clock in the morning. The A-Rock, one of the recruit leadership positions, was a big macho guy who decided he couldn't take it anymore. He tried a belt around his neck and was going to hang himself when I caught him. The chief on duty was teed off that he had to be awakened, called for assistance, and that's the last time we saw the A-Rock. My brother was in the chow hall and witnessed a TI call out someone who had placed their flashlight in their belt. I guess you're not supposed to do that. So the TI lights him up. "Is that where you keep your fricking flashlight? Is it a fricking lightsaber, Luke?" He made him stand at the end of 2 cafeteria lines, holding his flashlight like a lightsaber and striking dead the airmen that were leaving the 2 lines. At one point, there was a lull in traffic and the TI screams, "Oh, so fricking lightsabers don't make noise when they're motionless." So old buddy has to make the boom, boom noise as he waits for his next victim. The worst part of being there is that you can't laugh or you get punished too, and DIs can be some funny mofos. When I was in bed, one of the cafeteria walkers walked through the chow hall while we were eating. She was quite obese and wearing apple-bottom jeans. Our DI was sitting at the head of the table and started humming Get Low. Naturally, we all laughed. So after the chow, we went back to our bunks and got smoked. DI put Get Low on the speakers, and we did jumping jacks to the beat until they sang Hit the Floor. at which point we had to hit the floor and do push-ups while singing. And every time we laughed, he started the song over. I still shudder when I hear it. I'm an Army veteran. One morning in basic training, it was about midway through our 3-month cycle, and we were lined up for breakfast chow. While waiting in line, we had to stand at parade rest in columns of 2 in our PT uniform. We couldn't move or anything at the risk of being pointed out and screamed at. The uniform consisted of somewhat black short shorts and a grey t-shirt that said Army on the front. Well, the guy 3 rows in front of me had one of those no-reason cases of the morning wood. And the drill sergeant caught him as he was trying to move to hide it away. He pulls him off to the side and starts screaming, "What's wrong with you, Private? Why are your privates saluting in the chow line?" Of course, this yelling spreads to the ears of 2 other drills, and they come over as well. "Hey, Battle, come look at this! Hey, at ease that crap, Private!" As this was said, they noticed, and one drill sergeant bent down, face inches away from the full-mast culprit, and bellowed, "At ease! Private, you better get that crap in check!" I entered into the building before I could hear anything else about it. To this day, I still don't know how the drill sergeants went through that without so much as a smirk. I don't know what I'd do if someone shouted, "At ease," directly at my morning wood. Nothing in life so far has prepared me for that. We had a drill sergeant make a private carry a branch everywhere she went, so it would replenish all the oxygen she was wasting. We had a guy named Fitzwater. We called him Fatswater. We weren't just calling him that because he was fat, which he was also a lazy piece of crap who was constantly pretending to be hurt to get out of work. Anyways, he got teed off at us one day and said, "If anyone else calls me Fatswater again, I'm going to tell Drill Sergeant." Immediately the drill sergeant walks in and goes, "Hey, what's up, Fatswater?" Who'd have thought that exposing a weakness to people who spend their lives demeaning other people could go so poorly for this man? A mother of one of the other privates sent him a photo of a drill sergeant trashing a locker, with a letter saying, "Hope your drill sergeant isn't as mean as this," smiley face. It turned out that it was a picture of our drill sergeant. He had posted that on Facebook and it ended up going viral. She was just looking up pictures of drill sergeants and it just happened to be him. A woman in my company was from Africa. She had a graduate degree in some science, so she was very smart, but some things were lost on her, especially figures of speech. When we were on the firing range, we were told to keep the rifle up and down the range, meaning no matter what way you were facing, the end of the rifle was in the air and pointed down range. She didn't get that and swung her rifle all over the place. Everyone hit the ground. One of the drill sergeants yelled and asked if her brain took a crap in her head. She didn't understand that either. When I was on Paris Island, we were drilling on the parade deck and this one recruit kept screwing up. Our drill sergeant stopped us, stalked up to the recruit and started wearing him out. Gave him the classic DI, screaming in both ears, spit flying, smacking him in the face with his cover. Eventually the recruit broke down and silent tears started streaming down his face. The DI took his finger, wiped a tear from the recruit's eye and licked it, telling the recruit, "Now I own your soul." Fricking intense. One recruit in my platoon was getting IT'd and the DI took his soul. Then, I crap you not, the recruit responded with, "What soul, sir?" The DI let him get back online. This is one of the hidden advantages of being a ginger. A cousin of mine was going through training for the Royal Australian Navy. They have leader cadets amongst their ranks, who you must refer to as leader and not sir. One of these leaders was prowling about and asked my cousin if he was all sorted out. "Yes, sir," said my cousin on reflex. "What the frick did you say, cadet? 20 push-ups right now." My cousin, you should know, is a massive crap stirrer. Couldn't help himself. "Yes, sir," he says, getting down to do the push-ups. 50 frickin' push-ups, the leader barks. The way he told the story, the timing was just perfect. "Yes, sir." So he had to do around 100 push-ups, his arms gave out around 70 apparently. Later on, they were doing open water survival training, floating around in a blow-up raft in the middle of the ocean. The leaders, who were submerged below the raft in scuba gear, would occasionally leap up and drag a cadet into the water to simulate being knocked overboard by a wave. Sure enough, the leader my cousin had crossed was under the boat. He burst out like a shark, seized my cousin by his collar, and dragged him into the freezing water. Holding him down for longer than was probably necessary, the leader eventually released him. As my cousin was climbing back into the raft, shuddering from the cold, the leader asked him, "Still think you're funny, cadet?" As you can guess, the reply was, "Yes, sir."
He got grabbed and pseudo-drowned again immediately. I guess he's a glutton for punishment. He passed training, by the way.
Navy man here, got a few great ones for everybody. Spring of 2011. Whole berthing in the shower together singing It's Raining Men when the RDC, the Recruit Division Commander, E4 and above, comes in and screams, "You swinging pricks got about 20 seconds before I come in and rain my boot up your butt." Large black Navy chief, E7, walks into our compartment one day and says he feels like making it rain. Oh God, please no. Then before I could get ready, he's already dropping people on the deck and making them do intense exercises. He walks up to one recruit and asks him, "Does Chief like Hennessy or Hypnotic?" "Hennessy, Chief." "Wrong, you racist. I like Jack Daniels." Then proceeds to turn up the PC on this individual. Next person. "Is Chief good at basketball or football?"
Basketball?"
"Wrong. Chief is good at everything." Another time we were offered ice cream for supper one Sunday. We all took ice cream because, well, we frickin' deserved it. We knew we were going to pay for it, so I got the bright idea to put all the wrappers on my tray. So we walked in a straight line to throw our trays away, and the RDCs are looking for any signs of ice cream. Then they come to me as I'm throwing away the wrappers. "Recruit, did you eat 60 frickin' ice cream bars?"
"Yes, Chief."
"Every one of them." "Gentlemen, what's the biggest?"
"I'm a princess."
Red flag.
"I don't like cheap stuff."
Is always a dead giveaway. Also, mothers and sometimes fathers, depending on things. If your girl is BFFs with her mum, she'll end up like her in 20 years. It's like a freaking time capsule sometimes. My bro's wife is like this. The worst sign is when she's BFFs with her crazy witch mother, but only when they're apart. If they can't stand each other and argue all the time when they're together, but talk on the phone constantly when they're apart, run, motherfricker. This B-word is crazy.
"Oh, you can take it, you're a guy."
My best friend's ex would literally shove him around without even warning him to vent her unrelated bad mood, would be annoyed with his protests because she was significantly smaller than him and
"Men can take it."
Didn't change the fact that shoving someone into a wall or a chair literally just because you feel like it is as straightforward abusive as you can get. The entitlement of it all. Lack of awareness of the plight of the proletariat and the subjugation of archaic feudal hierarchies. Come and see the violence inherent in the system. And now, a flag I had never even considered or encountered, and that is apparently a very common one. I'm a woman, but I've noticed women who are obsessed with Marilyn Monroe are usually terrible in a variety of ways. Frick. This hits hard. I dated a girl for a while in high school. She was fun, had a great sense of humor, and she was absolutely gorgeous. It was high school, and crap happens. We broke up after a little less than a year. Fast forward to 22-year-old me at Walmart in the middle of the night buying bullcrap snacks after work, and who do I see in line? Awesome girl from high school. She's with some guy who I assume is her boyfriend. We talk a little in line and I head home. By the time I get home, I have a text that just says, "He's not my boyfriend, by the way." And that's when I knew that I should pursue this again. We went on our first date and it was just like high school. She was still amazing and I realized that my feelings for her seemed as if they hadn't dulled in the slightest. Everything seemed perfect. I learned that 1, she had gotten her nips pierced, and so I didn't really focus on number 2, which was that she had a portrait of Marilyn Monroe tattooed on her waist with a dermal piercing for the beauty mark. I thought, that's weird, but those are great. Little did I know that there was a pot of crazy brewing underneath all of it. We dated for less than 2 months when she told me that she didn't want to be together anymore. I was upset, but after talking about our relationship and our feelings, I told her that I understood. A couple of days later, I get a phone call. She is teed off, screaming at me about how much I hurt her. I'm confused, to say the least. She tells me that breaking up with me was a test. I was supposed to fight for her. She wanted to see if we were meant for each other. Needless to say, I blocked her phone number and haven't looked back since. Mail here. Ex loved Marilyn. Ditched me for some guy who made more money. Apartment building caught on fire. She stole a Marilyn Monroe painting from the apartment next to ours and half my insurance check. She wouldn't sign off on it unless I gave her half. Happened days after she took all of her crap and moved out. Yes, I fought and did my homework. No win situation. She even went on to stop responding to me when I had $1,000 worth of checks I needed her to sign for my expense reimbursement. The insurance company got to keep the money. I had a brief phase where I felt I related to her and people called me Marilyn. Can confirm, I was a mess at the time. Over the winter, I worked with a girl who would say to everyone, "Girls hate me because I'm cute and I steal their boyfriends." I tried to avoid her after that. Girls hate you because you're a B-word. When her mother says,
Boys just flock around her like bees around honey.
She agrees with a big smile. Respect for her brother, responding with,
You mean like flies around crap?
My wife's maiden name was King. She maintains that she is a princess by definition. Can't argue with her logic.
Based on your working, I assume that she changed her name when she married you. By that logic, you could argue that she abdicated.
I was dating this girl that absolutely loved KFC's fried chicken. While she was in the shower one time, I decided to run to KFC and surprise her with a quick little meal. I did not get mashed potatoes, never really cared for their take on mashed taters. She threw me out upon finding there were no mashed potatoes. Threw me out. Talks about how much she hates the $200 marble iPhone case her mum bought her. Constantly calls her brand new MacBook Pro a piece of crap because she doesn't know how to use it, then proceeds to throw it to the ground and drop it all the time. Breaks the $200 marble iPhone case. Excited when mum buys her a new one. Yeah, I didn't stick around.
Girls are too much drama, that's why I only have guy friends. I hate drama, princess who proceeds to cause all sorts of drama.
I think it's a fairly good, if not universal indicator that if any person, male or female, tends to push away their friends, they may not be great at relationships either. Refusing to do something on the grounds that she's too good for it. Not taking out the garbage, cleaning a bathtub, whatever. Nobody's too good to be humble and helpful. Anybody who thinks they are is a butthole.
A girl that was in my friends group got really angry when I talked about potentially moving houses, and I said that I would ask everyone, including her, for some help. Pizzas and beer guaranteed, of course. She went bat crap crazy about how girls do not do these kinds of things, and it's rude to even think about asking her. The other girls were livid,
referring to herself as a princess, or,
I can really be a diva, but cutesy smirk, gotta love me.
No, I do not.
The only time gotta love me is acceptable for anyone to say is if they're a pink baby dinosaur.
After going out a few times, she said,
Man, I've gone so overboard spending lately. Hey, can you take care of my credit card debt for me?
Me, silent, looking at her oddly, trying to decide if this is a bad joke.
I mean, you could be a sugar daddy, couldn't you?
Me? No, I'm not that old yet, nor wealthy, and I wouldn't be even if I were.
You don't want to be my sugar daddy?
That was the end of that relationship. I could maybe be your Spartime daddy, that's about it. I prefer the term Splendor daddy.
This happened to me. Went out once, worst date ever. Ended the night without even a handshake. Made no plans. She texted me to ask to borrow $500 a couple of times.
One of my best friends had a girlfriend once say she likes to have nicer things than other people, but doesn't want to work, so he needs to have a good job. Same girl also said she should come before family and God. I'm not religious, but that's still pretty nuts for people who are, which they were. Throwing a tantrum and being teed off at your boyfriend for not proposing the right way. Knew a girl who did this exact thing. We have a tradition at our university where you propose under this huge tree on campus. Only some people do it, not everyone. She literally threw a tantrum even though he planned a sweet proposal that would have pleased any other girl just because he didn't do it under the fricking tree. Usually having princess written across the rear of their pink sweatpants is a dead giveaway. In the 90s, it was a big trend to have princess written down one leg of the track pants. I made myself a pair in black with smack whore written down the side in red letters in the princess font. I'm starting to remember why my parents considered me to be such a huge disappointment. Lady who wrote that comment, thank you. This is a wonderful example of how to subvert a trend, and we're all better off for it. I once dated a girl who had a dad that bought her everything. He made a lot of money and was really great at saving it. His life's mission was to use that money to buy his B-word daughter's love. She was 22 and had her car paid for in full, insurance, phone bill, rent-free living, yada yada. For her birthday every year, she would get $1,000 in cash. I, on the other hand, was 23 at the time and paid for everything I owned. I had a crappier car than her because I paid for it myself. She would remind me often how much better her car was. I paid for all my other expenses and bills. Then, this insane thing happens. She gets a job at the bank I have all of my accounts at. She fricking looks up my bank account to see how much money I have. She tells me this and criticizes that I only have X amount in the bank when she has triple X in the bank and is so much better than me at saving money. I never once in our whole relationship brought up the money issue or how she didn't really work for what she had. This time though, I lost my fricking mind. I mentioned everything that she had that she didn't pay for, and explained that if it wasn't for her daddy, she would be a boulder $20,000 in debt. This blow-up was the biggest fight I've had in any relationship. Our relationship ended there. I learned a valuable lesson here. Always date someone who has a similar work ethic and financial goals as yourself. I realized that I always resented her and could admit I was jealous of her getting handed money. That's not right, nor is it healthy. I'm happily married to a very hard-working woman who will help me raise a hard-working child. Oh, don't worry. They'll tell you they're a princess. Was seeing a girl for a few months, and I gave her something on Valentine's Day that read, "Be my Valentine," or some other variation. She responded with, "That's sweet, but my daddy will always be my Valentine." She was in her second semester of law school and in her mid-20s, so that whole daddy is the best man in the world thing was off-putting. She ended up being high maintenance and unpredictable. Bad combination. And of course, my most read story was about some daddy-obsessed girl I dated in the army. I'll let Jenna know that everyone else thinks it's strange too. I should mention that none of that unhealthy daddy attachment made its way into the bedroom. Thankfully, there was only one daddy in her life. I forgot to mention that she got married about a year ago and she did an entire album for her wedding shoot with her and her daddy. When she complains about her parents on the first date, going on about her lines of succession and how they're always forcing her to marry a prince from another fiefdom. And how she just wants the title, but never even cleaned up after herself and makes her nasty stepsister do it all because she's pretty much an orphan now. Stepson had a girlfriend who was teed off because he didn't buy her a 1-week anniversary gift. Run, dude, run. To elaborate, they are pretty young, early teens. She didn't get him anything. This girl was nuts, would call him over and over. If he didn't answer, she would text him 8 million times. Luckily, he has since moved with me, new school and different city altogether, which is good because they dated like 4 times over the year. She would break up with him and then want him back. Well, to be fair, they're young and probably receive a little more of the princess treatment from their parents. Let's just hope they grow out of it, or into it in a healthy way. Senior year of high school prom was coming up, and this one girl who I kinda knew asked my friend if he would go to prom with her. He said yes, but a few days later changed his mind, which was 100% a prick thing to do. She, however, really wanted someone to go to prom with, and the guy that turned her down, along with some of my other mutual friends, told me I should go with her. Which sounded like a good idea because she was kind of cute and I was going alone at that point. A week or so later, a few of us were hanging out at Nifty 50s and they gave us those little paper hat things and I wrote, "Prom?" on mine, and she said yes. Sick. On the way home from asking her out, she said to me, "How does it feel knowing that you're going to prom with the birthday princess?" First red flag. Upon further conversation, she told me that prom was going to be on her 18th birthday, and because of that, she was definitely going to get prom queen, which would most likely be the absolute last reason I'd want to get prom queen in her situation. Fast forward a week or so, I had just gotten home from school and I got a text from her asking if I wanted to go with her to pick out shoes for prom. I should tell you that halfway through my senior year, I moved to another school district 40-ish minutes away, and my date lived like 15 minutes on the other side of school. Not to mention that the car I drove was a gas-guzzling machine, and it was like $10 round trip when prices were high. I tried telling her that I had just gotten home, and that it would take me an hour or so to get there, and that I had work that I needed to get done. I also had zero interest in going, but that's beside the point. Reasonable excuse though. She lost it. She was saying all this stuff about how messed up it is that I wouldn't do this for her, and other random stuff that totally didn't make sense. Then she said, "I guess I'll just ask Anthony to go with me." Anthony was a close friend of mine who had off and on feelings for my date, and they were close friends. There was a reason he didn't ask her, but I can't remember. I told her to go ahead because that didn't bother me. I wasn't trying to date the girl. Hell, I wasn't even trying to get laid. I purely asked her out because she was dying to go to prom with someone, and I was single. Flash forward to day of prom. A few days before prom, she asked me if she should get a tan. I told her I really don't like that look, especially not awful spray tan. The day of prom, she showed up looking like a carrot and her hands looked like that of a black person. Her tan was bad. Uneven, blotchy, you name it. She was proud of it though, so who was I to tell her otherwise? She said, "How does the birthday princess look?" And I told her she looked beautiful. She told me at that time where to meet her and her friends who I was now taking, which was news to me, but I bit my tongue and went along with it. I get to her friend's house 5 minutes early, and she is 45 minutes late. When she finally arrives, she was wearing a tiara that read, "Birthday Princess." Her and her friend probably took 100 pics together, and me and the other dude, who I hated but by the end of the night found out he was actually pretty cool, just sat to the side waiting for our turn for the pics. I think we took 3 together. Now, when I tell people this part of the story, they get confused because apparently my school was weird. We had this thing called pre-prom, where basically we'd go up on stage in the auditorium, walked out with our date, get pictures taken, and get judged for prom king or queen. People do little cute things on stage in order to gain approval and to get more votes. Some funny, some cute, some just walked out like normal. What she made us do is she walks out on stage, first looking around. I creep up behind her with a huge happy birthday balloon, so everyone knew it was her birthday, tap her on the shoulder, and when she'd turn around, I'd be on one knee, put a sash on her that read, "Birthday Princess." It was cheesy, it was uncomfortable, I hated it. Prom time. So we get to prom and take our seat, we eat a little, and then people start going on the dance floor. I ask if she wants to dance, but she says she's not feeling well, and I should just go. I obliged and danced for a good 20 minutes, and when I look at her sitting down, she looks very upset. I notice her staring at the boy who turned her down dancing with another girl, and I felt bad for her. I went up to her and told her to come to the floor and have fun with everyone, and she says she's fine. A half hour passes before I walk up to her. She looks me dead in the eyes, and before I can say anything, she snaps and says, "You really need to learn to leave me the hell alone." Well then. I leave her at the table and go and hang out with my friends. People keep coming up to me and asking where my date is, and then someone asks, "Why is she crying?" The question then turns to, "What did you do to her?" It got to the point where even teachers and school faculty pulled me over asking if I did anything to upset her. An hour passes and it's time to announce prom king and queen. I sat down again and she calmed down by this point. She was telling the whole table how she has to be prom queen because it's her birthday and she's the birthday princess. I told her not to get her hopes up just in case it didn't happen, and she didn't like that at all. She wasn't prom queen, she wasn't even nominated. She ran out of the room crying. After it was announced and people started dancing again, I went up to the aforementioned Anthony and told him if he wanted to dance with my date, he could. He told me he would feel bad and didn't want to do that to me, but I assured him it would be fine. I looked over a little later, noticed them slow dancing, and that was the happiest I'd been all night. I then went off to dance with some of the other girls who didn't have dates, and for once, prom was fun. Too bad it ended 20 minutes later. As everyone is gathering their things and clearing out, my date finds me again and says, "I feel like you're upset with me." I didn't say a word. She asked if we could go to Applebee's because it's her birthday and they love singing to her every year. First, I told her she wasn't special, they do that to everyone. That was a real slap in the face to her. Secondly, I told her by the time we got there, we would only have 15 minutes before it closed. She told me that as long as we order before it's closed, we can stay there. As someone who was working as a dishwasher at the time, I knew how much of a prick move that was. She said, "Please, but I'm the birthday princess." I refused. The drive home was one of the most uncomfortable car rides of my life. Every time we passed a restaurant, "Do you think Denny's would sing to me? Do you think the diner would sing to me? Do you think McDonald's would sing to me?" I have never met someone, yet alone an 18-year-old, who was so obsessed with their birthday. I pulled up to her other friend's house, a bunch of people were going here after prom to hang out, and we all got out. As I was walking up the driveway, I got the thought, what the hell am I doing? I walked back to my car and drove away. In conclusion, while she wanted to feel like a princess, I felt like 2017 Prince. Also, the day of prom at school, I asked my friend if he wanted to hang out after prom. He told me he wasn't going because he was going to ask out the girl I was going with and didn't want to go alone. Fast forward a few months. I hadn't spoken to the girl I went to prom with since I drove away. Literally not a word. It was the day of graduation, and my one friend was having a graduation party. I went, and lo and behold, my date was there. A group of us started talking, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, the way you asked me to prom was cool, but the way that blank, the kid who didn't end up going to prom because I was going with her, would have asked me would have been so much better." His plan was going to be to get Snow White at Disney to ask this girl to prom because she was obsessed with Snow White. Like, she cried on senior trip at Disney when she saw her because she was so overwhelmed with excitement. Maybe the first red flag should have been that she was obsessed with princesses. Blimey. Listen, I think most of us came out there feeling a little less bad about our various cringe prom dates, and let's be thankful for that. I declined to send a selfie and got a B-word fit on the first day of our texting as I skipped work to feverishly sleep through the flu. "Honestly, I don't know if I can trust you. If you won't do such a simple thing, what if you abandon me in my hour of need in the airport or hospital?" I can only groan so hard. My friend's sister calls herself a princess. First of all, she's really picky about food and never eats anything gross, like chicken legs or wings. She once shed a fricking forced tear when she learnt that the thing she was eating is chicken legs at the middle of the buffet. We were in a restaurant with my friend and she tags along. So when we asked her order, she just said that we should know her favorite foods since we have known her for so long. Not really. I just ordered her some burger meal and she threw a tantrum since she doesn't eat ketchup, and I should have known this. What the frick? We were in Burger King. She ended up clearing her whole meal straight to the floor and ordered salad. When she talks, she requires her boyfriend to pay her full attention. Looking away is not an option, or he would disrespect her. Goes for coffee with someone. We should see a movie. Sure thing. You're paying, right? I don't have any money. So I did. We walk past the snack bar and she goes and queues up. Slightly confused, I stand in line with her. She orders what she wants and then looks at me. I chuckle, place my ticket on the counter, and walk off and out of the cinema. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.